We'll call the meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Board Chair Morton.
Here.
Vice Chair Hacker.
Here.
Ms. Nesset. Dr. Ryan?
Here.
Mr. Trainer?
Here.
Ms. Thornton?
Here.
Ms. Louders?
Here.
Mr. Wakeford?
Here.
Dr. Pruitt?
Thank you. Getting to board business, item number 1 is going to be handled by Eric. I assume everybody's met Eric, our new attorney, and we appreciate his great work so far.
As Chair Morton just said, I'm Eric Olson. I'm the board counsel. And I'll be handling the first item on the agenda, which are amendments to SBHE Policy 303.1. There are two proposed amendments to the policy. The first in Division 3 is to eliminate the requirement that agendas be posted 7 days prior to a regular meeting. The Attorney General has repeatedly issued opinions that state there is no set time period before a meeting that an agenda must be posted, and the hard deadline in the policy was causing concerns with respect to whether the deadline for amending the agenda as new items come forward. So this clarifies that, provided that there's still reasonable notice provided to the public. The second piece is to add a new Section 4, which creates a standing rule of order permitting the board's consent agenda to move forward without approving a special rule of order at each meeting. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'll return the floor to the chair.
Move for approval.
Second.
Chair Morton.
Yes.
Question, if this passes, which it should, do we have to go back and do something about the minutes at the last meeting when we had a consent agenda?
Eric?
We do not, because we believe. Okay, we're on still. For last meeting, because we proceeded under consent without objection, that item will stand. But moving forward, the proper procedure would be to have this rule of order in place.
Thank you.
Board Chair Morton.
Andy?
Chair Morton, I realize that we want to follow law and procedure and policy, that we don't have to publish this agenda, 7 days or whatever the number is. But I think in our due diligence to the citizens, students, faculty, and staff, I think we should still try to publish the agenda as soon as we can so that they can have time to review it and, have any input that they might have. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, my comment was the same in the interest of all the stakeholders in the state. I have no problems waiving the 7 days, but in theory that could now mean posting it 1 day ahead of time. And I'm wondering whether one could, instead of taking the number out, just list a smaller number, 4 or 5 or so that there is still a lower limit.
Any other discussion?
Just, Mr. Chair, I'd just point out, Eric didn't cover it, but any board member that wants to remove an item off of consent and bring it to regular business, that is a non-votable action. So if you move as a board member to take an item, you want to know more about it, you're able to make a motion to move that to the regular business, and that's non-debatable, and it automatically moves to regular business. Correct, Eric?
That's correct.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. We have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes. Okay. The agenda. Do we need a motion to approve the agenda?
No, at this time, the chair would call for any questions
Okay.
as to the agenda from the board members.
Do we have any additions to the agenda we'd like to add?
Chair Morton, if we could add a discussion topic only regarding the South Dakota Board of Regents' decision to offer in-state tuition to surrounding states as item number 21.
Thank you. We thought it would be important to get some input and have a dialogue about that. So this is not going to be, this is just the beginning of the dialogue. Any, do you need a second to add an agenda?
If you can take a voice vote on that. Yes, you would need a motion and a second, and then there would be a voice vote.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes?
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes. Do any board members have any questions or concerns about the consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes?
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes. So this will take us to other reports. The NDSA. Jared, are you on the line or here?
Yes, I am. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, hello and good morning, everyone. The Student Association held its most recent meeting on November 2nd and 3rd at Valley City State University. The meeting was attended by Valley City's newly appointed president, Dr. Alan McVeigh, Chancellor Hagrod and Vice Chancellor Weiskup, Senator Larry Robinson, and State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kirsten Basler. There are three things I'd like to report on this morning. The first of which is that after a 6-month process, our General Assembly unanimously approved NDSA's new 2019 through 2023 strategic plan. This plan emphasizes NDSA's role as a body that represents students and state governance and emphasizes our role in preparing our students to be the transformative leaders of today and tomorrow. We hope to have this plan printed in advance of the January state board meeting. The next item is that our executive team looks forward to collaborating with student government and the systems office as we quickly approach the 2019 legislative session. The organization has approved resolutions in support of funding for open educational resources, the Higher Education Talent Fund grant, and sufficiently funding the university system. And then finally, NDSA will be having an informal digital meeting tomorrow, and a regular business meeting will be in January at Bismarck State College. Are there any questions about my report?
Any questions of Jared? Thank you, Jared. We appreciate your work. We appreciate your concise and informative report. Thank you. Moving on to item number 7, a report from CCF. Birgit?
Seeing as this meeting was a little bit later than they usually are, CCF actually had 2 meetings in between. And at the second one, there was a letter re-emphasized and sent to the SBHE members on the Academic Freedom and Tenure Policy 605.1. This policy had undergone revision. Last time it was tabled so that the faculty could have a stand. We had a meeting with me and Dr. Drexel and Chancellor Hagerod and Dr. Ryan, and a revision was proposed after that. The faculty are still in opposition or to this policy, and to be clear here, that is the CCF faculty. I would like to read portions of the letter because I'm not sure everybody has gotten it, and these are the bullet points. Presidents have made a decision to move into a new role in higher education and have chosen to leave the faculty. 2, the process for evaluating an individual for making a recommendation for awarding tenure to the SBHE often involves the Departmental Committee on Promotion and Tenure, the department chair, the college or college PT&E, the dean or the college or school or college, the provost of the institution, and the sitting president. Successfully navigating this time-consuming process for a presidential candidate prior to hiring is unlikely. 3, potential for a former president to be intentionally or unintentionally disruptive in the operations of an institution upon returning to the faculty ranks of that institution. 4, potential financial burden at the departmental and institutional level to absorb a new faculty member upon a president returning to the faculty ranks of that institution. The CCF faculty do appreciate the efforts that have been made to the policy, but these concerns remain. There is a provision, if it is the will of the SBHE to change academic freedom and tenure policy 605.1, the Council respectfully requests that the evaluation for tenure reflect best practices at the individual institution at which the President resides. Although in opposition to this change, we concur that the previous tenure shall be a minimum requirement for a President to be awarded tenure following evaluation by the Department Committee on Promotion and Tenure, the Dean of the College or School, the Provost, and finally the Chancellor. In this situation, as the President is already in place, the Chancellor shall make the recommendation for awarding of tenure to a sitting President to the SBHE after carefully deliberating the outcome of the institutional process. Under no circumstances does the Council support using tenure in either the hiring process or the guarantee of tenure to any presidential candidate. This would circumvent best practices for the tenure evaluation process in place of all our institutions. So since it has been brought to my attention that there was an incident in the past where it wasn't entirely clear to everybody, when I was switching from making a statement as a CCF representative and an SBHE board member, this was the CCF standpoint. Now comes my SBHE standpoint. And to some people on CCF, it might come as a surprise, but I do actually think that the faculty make valid points here. In particular, the intentional or unintentional disruptive behavior in operations of an institution can happen, and I fully agree that we should not use tenure in the hiring process, like putting it into the job ad or something like that. This would circumvent best practices. But as a board member, there's also the larger perspective to consider, and that is a system perspective. And I do understand everybody who says it will be easier to attract presidents just like that. So, as so often, there are different group of stakeholders, and different group of stakeholders have different needs. And I just trust the board that they will make a decision that fits the needs of all these stakeholders and puts all of that under consideration. And I definitely want to thank all the people that have worked on the policy and on the revision of the policy, because I think delaying it by a month and sending it to the faculty has made for a much better policy.
Any questions, Chancellor?
And I just wanted to thank Dr. Preuss's efforts, Dr. Dragnath, on this, and just to reassure people who don't understand the whole evolution of this. This has been going on since at least, I think, March meeting, that we're trying to be more competitive. A recent Chronicle article talked about the need to cultivate and encourage faculty leaders to rise to presidential levels, because there is a move nationally to bring in business types. I've even heard former congressmen sometimes become presidents. But the other thing I would say is, remember, when we do these searches, there's always a chair of the search committee from that campus. And the last couple searches have been tenured faculty. I think Hesham Relwini was in yours, President Kennedy. And so the faculty will have a voice when they look at these applicants. It won't be a state board chancellor type of thing. It's a very broad-based fairly large search committee. So just want to reassure people, we're just trying to actually help elevate faculty and produce a bigger and better pool of competitive, thoughtful leaders.
Any other comments? I would just comment that I think by granting tenure to out-of-state presidents that join us with tenure, I really think we're showing deep respect in honoring the tenure process throughout our nation. We have presidents that come in, they've earned tenure, and for us to say that in North Dakota we're unique, our tenure is better than anybody else's, our process is better, I don't think that's correct. So I think we're showing great respect for the tenure process as a nation. So we will get to this later and we'll have a vote.
Okay. Then I will keep going with my CCF report. So now we are switching back to CCF reports. There was one item on that. And one other item, there was one other vote, and the faculty have established a task force, and members will be determined later to get involved in the legislative session and figure out how they want to deal with that. Now we are getting back to SBHE, and that gets me to my summary from the 11 campuses. As faculty advisor on the State Board of Higher Education, I've traveled the state and talked to faculty at the 11 campuses. This was 7 face-to-face visits and 4 IVN visits. I've been west once, but not twice. And I've sent you the summary that came out of that. Phil Weisskopf also has a more intense summary of all my individual ones from the 11 institutions. This is a compilation. The overwhelming message, and that still struck me as amazing after everything that happened, is that the faculty are very much dedicated to their jobs, to the students, to student learning, to student success. I've heard many people comment that their love to the students is the reason why they are still there. The problem, though, is if you want to have excellent student learning, that takes excellent teaching and that takes excellent faculty. And with the budget we got 2 years ago, it has been more difficult to recruit and retain our excellent faculty. Many of us have seen colleagues leaving, and there are concerns about the increased workload that is a result of that as well. I was not aware that faculty at our 9 colleges are having salaries in the 40,000s as a starting salary, maybe $2,000 more if they have a PhD. Add to that, no raise for a year or 2 or 3 or 4, and increased expenses for personal and family health. That isn't awfully competitive on today's market, and I'm really glad that the SBHE passed such a good budget and that the governor came up with something yesterday that was considerably better than what he came up with earlier in the year. Faculty salary has been given as one reason why faculty are leaving. Other reasons at the research universities is a perceived reduced ability to do research, in part because they have to teach more as opposed to write more grants. At the same time, the administrative support isn't there, so there is a lot more that one has to do there without having necessarily the knowledge how to do it, meaning it takes longer again. So faculty have left, but they have been replaced, and that's true. But if a collaborator of mine leaves, doesn't necessarily mean I can still collaborate with the replacement, so it still impacts my research program. Tightly connected with the faculty salaries then, and I will write a letter on behalf of the faculty to ND Perth, is that health expenses have gone up so far, and there is talk that we may have to pay more for our health insurance in the future. And then the concern is, of course, yes, it's very nice to get a 4% raise, but A, we don't have it yet, and B, there's still the possibility that our health insurance goes up, so it may actually just disappear straight in the health insurance and not make anybody's life any better. And I know that the SBHE isn't responsible for the health insurance. I will talk to Andy Perth about it, but I think it's something that one should probably monitor a little bit. and see how it goes. Increased workload was an issue on all institutions. For the colleges, it means teaching workload has increased. For the research faculty, they are expected to write more grants, but at the same time teach more, which is difficult to do. There were several mentions of the task force, and since the task force has completed their work, I won't go into the specifics of it. What came out to me overall is that at the research institutions, NDSU and UND, faculty are cautiously in favor of it, mostly because they like more flexibility and the independence and the autonomy that comes with it. Whereas at the colleges, there seems to be some amount of fear. I think they feel safer under the umbrella of the two big ones and think it might end up being more competitive landscape. Then there were some comments that were solely for the SBHE. I leave it up to you to read those. I have several of such reports. CCF got the ones with the CCF comments, and I sent one to the governor's office when the task force was still in place. They only got it up to here. So the different groups get all the same comments as the basic, and then the ones that relate to their own specific group. And I think that is all that I had to say from both CCF and myself.
Thank you. Any questions of Birgit? Thank you, Birgit. Thank you for your work and your patience. Staff Senate, Andy?
Thank you, Chair Morton. The Staff Senate met November the 13th, and I sent the campus summaries real quickly to you last night. I would just want to highlight a couple things. NDSCS, Staff Senate donated to a Thanksgiving dinner for students, and they donated $300 out of their own fund to help pay for the for some of the meal. So that's a good thing. Give thanks for that. NDSU released a staff appreciation video, and there's a link in the update if you want to watch that. I watched it and I was pretty impressed. I mean, I guess Thanksgiving time is a time to be thankful. So their appreciation of faculty and staff and so forth was interesting. UND is doing, it was in the newspaper just yesterday, they're doing, they're gathering items for pets and people, so to speak, I guess. Hubs of Love is what they're calling it. I thought that was really interesting. And also Williston State did a Thanksgiving meal where they hosted some students and so forth. That was really nice as well too. So staff are doing some good things around campuses, so I think we ought to recognize that. I too visited with all 11 campuses between September and as recent as yesterday. So I'll give a report very similar to what Birgit gave here just a few moments ago. So thanks to Chair Morton for the opportunity to visit the campuses. It was really good. I think it's important for us as a board to meet and keep in touch with the campuses and the people that we govern. The campuses are crucial to the mission of and drive the system. Listening to them will help us improve and thrive. I met with staff and staff senators from all the campuses between September and as recent as yesterday. I gave a brief summary of what the board does, its duties and its structure. Then I listened to them and tried to capture their thoughts as best as possible. I heard a lot of different questions, concerns, and statements based on their geography and their size of their campus and so forth. So I listened a lot and I got a lot of information, but it's not all in this report. So I'll try to hit the high points here. What staff told me overwhelmingly is despite measures to uplift staff, there's still some morale issues on the campuses. This is in part to a couple factors, but mostly the lack of salary increases over the past time frame. Some have had increased workloads and concern with the healthcare costs that may be shifted out of them, but as we learned here recently that may not be. We'll see what happens, I guess. One campus told me that one of their departments was at 5 prior to reductions, and now they're down to 3, and that has an impact on what people do in their office and their daily and their weekly and monthly duties. When I talk to staff, I caution them to not always ask for raises because that's not always popular and that's not always something that we like to discuss. But if you have to look at it in your perspective, if you always ask your boss for a raise, how would that go over? You know, I think that it does affect them, but at this time it's an important issue to their lives and their families. So it's important to them, and that's why they keep bringing it up. So therefore, the discussion has been raised numerous times, and the news about salary increases in Governor Governor Burgum's budget yesterday was good. It was good news, and it was well received. What I told staff that the board does is that they understand the employees and their need for compensation. Compensation increases, that is. What we all know about the budget cuts and their impacts and the proposed future cuts possibly. You know, there's numbers out there that tell us that there's more than 600 some employees that have been cut at various campuses here and there, and that's a lot. When it comes to the lack of compensation increases, staffers told me that staff do work, and they work hard, and they look to the private sector for comparing what's out there and what's available. They're grateful for the benefits that they receive, but more and more companies are offering similar or same benefits. The old saying is that we used to work in higher education because of the benefits, but I think the private sector has caught up with that in some cases. I also told staff that the board did present a needs-based budget, and they understand the need for not reducing the budget since last summer. What I also heard was some very good questions, ones that made me think, made me go, that's a really good question. The one question that was brought to me was, do the board members have enough information to make decisions? And I'm not sure that that's an easy question to answer, but they do the best with the information that's presented to them. Board members ask for more information, and they ask for more details, and they usually get it. They seek that information, but they don't have all the information from all the campus, because it's a tremendous amount of information that board members receive on a sometimes weekly, monthly basis. And one additional question that related to the information on details was offering, and I use this kind of jokingly, as a higher ed 101 class. This might be an opportunity for board members to have a better understanding of higher education in the campuses. Don't worry, we're not going to give you a grade on it if you take this class. I do know that the governance committee and the board have tried to better onboard new members and to try to help them get up to speed with information, issues, and relevant data. Staff are fully engaged at all of the campuses. They're paying attention to what's going on, they seek knowledge, and they want to provide input and solutions to their respective campuses at the system and as a whole. They have good ideas, thoughtful insight, and they care about the success of their campus, the students, and the faculty. With this, I wonder about the leadership and the campuses, about the future of the university system and its workforce. One question that was brought up was, do we see a number of employees retiring soon, like in some industries? And I think that we need to take a look at that as well. We need to focus on the student, but with the future needs of the student comes a need of a variety of needs in the faculty and staff area as well too. Their education in this determination that meets the needs of the students as we look forward to 2030. We will still need faculty in the classroom, and we'll still need supportive staff to ensure the campuses run smoothly. But let's look to the future as well too for the needs of our employees. Another topic that was raised was fear of retribution on a couple different parts. Some staff have the perception that if they're too aggressive, their seeking of change and policy or procedure may be not taken well. The second was participation in staff senate on their campuses. Some feel that their supervisors or departments don't fully support them in their participation. They can also feel that protections are in place for faculty in this case, but staff are not protected in that. On the other hand, many feel supported in serving in their staff leadership role. Staff have many good ideas and suggestions, and both for their campuses and for the system as a whole, allowing them to lead and provide good input for morale and for the good of the campuses and for the system. Staff do work very hard in their daily duties and tasks on their individual campuses. They understand that change is necessary in policy and procedure and in technology too. But we must keep in mind that change in technology can sometimes create more work. So when looking at implementing new technology, seek their input, ask good questions of them. They are the users of the technology. They do the work, and sometimes that work may become sometimes less efficient with some technology. Finally, staff asked about the governance model, and that was a discussion that took place on almost every campus. I don't think that they fully understand the reason for change, some of them anyways, and the change that really is necessary. But what they do understand is that there still is an east-west divide. In conclusion, the staff are, in conclusion, I'm sorry, the staff serve at the pleasure of the presidents and administration, and they're happy to serve the needs of the students and the institutions. They want to serve, they want to be there. They do have good input, and they can help at bringing resolutions to changes. I'll leave you with this. Ask them. You might be surprised what they offer. Thank you.
Any questions of Andy? Well, thank you for those reports. It's always very helpful to have as much information as possible. Also appreciate the board members and Birgit and Andy who have made the campus visits. Casey started something, and we have since funded it. Jill also made a tour of campuses. We appreciate that. Just remind our board members, if you ever want to visit the campuses, that we will, of course, take care of your expenses. It's a good exercise, and we encourage you to. It gives you a chance to really delve deeper too. These reports are good. They're interesting. People have to realize too that as a board, we strive for campus autonomy. We want to support campus autonomy. And there are some issues that are really campus issues and some that are more board issues. And we certainly don't want to get involved when it's strictly a campus issue. We have leaders, we have good leaders, and we empower them and we trust them. Okay, we will go to item 9, Chancellor Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just an update on several things. As you recall, when we did the Envision 2030 retreat, I guess May and June, we said we would update and roll up specific things into the strategy, goals, and whatnot. So what you'll have here on your desk is a draft biennial report. And so we welcome any additions, feedback. The chair graciously offered that I could write the little summary at the front, and I assure you we're not going to have a photo that big of me. That was very kind of my staff to do that, but the photo, in my opinion, can just be gone. You don't need a photo of the chancellor. And we'll bring the board's photo, which is in the back. We'll bring that forward. So, but your feedback's welcome. And again, we're continuing to work on the many tasks that you gave us, not just in the strategy, but in the Envision 2030. For example, there would have been a tribal representative here today, but they have an annual meeting, so they are all together today. But we've already had improved communications with them, which is one of the major things that they appreciated that the board had done. We're moving ahead on the dual mission, dual polytechnic programs, which the Governor's Workforce Development Council, which is actually meeting again today, endorsed. I think I mentioned that in October. They had a draft where they're endorsing it, but they did endorse it, and the Governor did endorse that as one of his, innovations. He saw great promise. Again, that came out of the Envision process. We held a privacy AI event, artificial intelligence, very well attended. Almost 40 people, Governor's Office, National Guard General Dorman was there. ITD spent the whole day with us, a former Justice of the Supreme Court. And I don't know if you know that WICHE now has made two of their top priorities, the cybersecurity initiative pattern after the North Dakota model. Colorado just did theirs last week. And also they have now adopted digital privacy as a second major initiative. And I want to thank the students. If Jared is still listening, they were very engaged. And in fact, Dr. Weber, we had a meeting on that, and we're looking at asking the students to write up what they see as crucial student digital privacy, things that we may not even be aware of, student digital Bill of Rights type of issue. We also then, under the Envision was the governance, continued improvement of our governance model here internally. And I've already got 3 presidents, Dr. Shirley, Scogan, and Kennedy, working on the subcommittee structure that we talked about. And we've had some very good meetings on that, and should have a draft proposal for you early in the year. And so several things, they're moving ahead. I appreciate the presence, and we've added item 21, but one of the Envision findings was that the tuition environment is very dynamic. You know, Williston is not Wapaton. We know John Richmond's in a battle with states that are just handing away money. You know, high priority programs were funded by South Dakota last year. Well, now, as Dr. Brashani just circulated, they voted just last night to give in-state tuition. So we had already had a Chancellor's Cabinet group with President Kennedy, Richmond, Brashani, and Member Trainer is the state board rep. We're already studying this, and that's now item 21. So again, well aligned to several things that are happening, and we'll just keep you going on that. And please, if you can, as we've done before, give his feedback, about a week, take a week's time, and if there's any changes, additions, you want a different picture of yourself in there, whatever you'd like. But this would be something we'd have available also to hand out to legislators, this biennial review. That's all I've got. Bill, did you have anything else to add? Okay. Who are you pointing at? Darren had something. Go ahead, Darren.
Chair Morton, members of the board, just a couple of quick updates from the IT world. Blackboard continues to roll. We're in the final stages of bringing 3 more campuses into the tenant. That will make the number 10 out of 11, and we're working furiously to get the 11th campus underway as quickly in summer, fall as possible. Continues to run well. Typical operational kinds of disruptions you get in any enterprise system, but no major outages to report. Second thing I'd just like to call your attention to is we've just implemented a phishing management system. So that's phishing, PH phishing, not F phishing. What that allows us to do is really do 2 things. It's both there's a training component. It allows us to do phishing assessments to users. If that user is caught, and they get some immediate feedback, some immediate training, just-in-time training. So it gives us that capability, but probably more importantly, it gives us on the backside a management system to be able to allow users to report phishing to us, and then our security team can use that to better manage the response if we do have a phishing attack that comes through. And we get them on a very regular basis. So that is underway. We do have a few other campuses that are working with us. It would be available to all campuses. It's pretty cost effective, actually. If that's something that any other campus sees as something that they'd like to focus on, we have the system in place now to provide that as a service. So with that, that's really the only 2 things I was going to update the board on. Thank you.
Any questions of Darren?
And Chair, if I could just compliment Darren, we are working very closely with the governor's staff on his governor's cyber K-20 thing. We had 2 meetings, just one a couple days ago. The cybersecurity, the exploring joint hires. But if you heard the governor's talk yesterday, he featured that pretty strongly. And I just want to thank Darren that I know it's added to your workload of these meetings and coordinations and whatnot, including the governor's ITD strategy is fairly expansive, of which we've been asked to integrate the state board IT strategy in there. So I want to thank Darren again. I know it's more workload for you, but appreciate your cooperative attitude. That's all I have, sir.
Item 11. Pen, Bill? Lumina update?
I've provided a report for the record. I won't read it to you, but the Lumina grant work that we've been doing with other state agencies and our state team is approaching end game. We have briefed the Workforce Development Administrative Committee, working very closely with other state agencies, and the North Dakota Consensus Council and Engage to Inspire Marketing have both been very, very helpful with us on this. So we're coming to you soon with final products, working administrative framework to guide state attainment work into the next several years of deployment, the marketing plan framework, and an agreement with the key interdisciplinary leaders to continue making the attainment a goal. This will guide us over the long term here. So we'll be providing to you here in the next couple of weeks the final report, which lays all this out, give you time over the holidays and into early January to review it. And if you have no comments or corrections or changes to that, that's what we'll go forward with back to the Lumina Foundation as the final report on the execution of the grant. So in the end, we're in pretty good shape to round out this grant and provide you with the final product here in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Phil. Any questions of Phil?
Mr. Chair, if I can make a comment, I think we talked about it on the phone call, that this is a state board initiative. We've been making the effort, but it's always the hope that this would be adopted as a statewide goal. The states that have been successful, Indiana, Governor Pence, Tennessee, and the Drive to 55. But the feedback we're getting from the Workforce Development Council is that it may not be adopted by the governor, the 65. So, you know, I may be coming back to you later in the year because it'd be unreasonable to expect this state board could drive the whole state to a goal if it's not agreed to by everybody else. Doesn't mean we don't still take the report. We do the things we're doing, the dual mission, the Polytechnic, the things we're doing all fit to increase attainment certificates, et cetera. But again, the 65% goal we adopted really would eventually have to be adopted by the whole state government. So just want to give you a heads up on that. More to follow in the spring.
And in the meantime, we'll continue to work with the Workforce Development Council folks to press forward on this.
Thank you. Item 11, legislative update process. Tammy?
Thank you, Chair Morton. So time's getting closer. It starts January 3rd. We've got the legislators coming back to town. So wanted to review and let you know the process that we follow in the system office during session so that you understand how we're tracking things and how some of the decisions get made. So there is an attachment to the agenda that is the starting document. There's only a handful of bills on there that we know of right now. These are bills that have come through the Interim Higher Education Committee, or in the case of the lower three bills, in the Taxation Committee, and then others that we know we would like to pre-file or have pre-filed already. This list will get very long during the session, but this is an example of how we will track those. You can see on the attachment we have included links to those bill drafts as they exist today. We don't have bill numbers yet. We will add that as soon as session starts and all the bills have officially been introduced, because they don't receive a bill number until they've been introduced to the legislature. The process we'll follow in the office is every bill that comes in, and there are hundreds of bills that come in during the session. They come in fast and furious for a few weeks. We will be reading every single one of those, as will our attorneys. And we'll be not just higher ed bills, we'll read all of the bills so that we can find any maybe hidden higher ed impacts that might be in there, or if there's other legal issues where we need to do some more work. So we'll read all of those, make a decision on which ones we need to track, monitor, or testify on, and add those to the list that you see in front of you. So we'll have this ongoing tracking document. You can see from that schedule that we'll, of course, have the bill number, and then we'll have the sponsors try to track what our position is so that we know. All of those, there's so many bills that come in during the session that we won't be bringing every single bill to the board for a position. A lot of them are fairly self-explanatory and they're easy to understand. If there are controversial bills that come up, or those that have substantial impact to our system, we may bring those to you. So we might need to have a special meeting to talk about that so the board can take a position. But we'll try to keep those to only the most significant bills. And then we'll just give you updates during the session at your regular meetings, so you'll know where we're at. We do have a process to assign the bills depending on the category that they fall into to various vice chancellors in the office. Of course, the chancellor and the board chair are, involved in everything, and we consult with them, but we will assign them based on their content. If they're fiscal, they'll fall into my area. If they're academics, they'll fall into Vice Chancellor Johnson's, and IT, Darren King. But we'll do that, and that'll give us somebody to track it, prepare testimony, coordinate testimony with other entities if we need that. So we've got that process all lined up. We will also, and we've done this, well, at least for the last session, that's the extent of my experience in the office, but we'll have weekly meetings with the presidents. Those will be held on Fridays, because we get the hearing schedules on Thursdays. So we'll sit down with the presidents, go through all the bills. Here's what's come in, here's what's maybe gone away, here's what's on the hearing schedule next week, and work with the presidents so they know and can have input into what we're testifying on, who's testifying, if we need to bring in people from the campuses. They've always volunteered to do that. In the past, they're very willing to do that. So we'll keep that process up through all the session so that we're keeping in regular contact. On top of those meetings, the various vice chancellors will be in contact much more frequently with their various teams. As fiscal notes come into the office, where we're expected to explain to the legislature how much a bill might cost, or if there's some other fiscal impact, those come into our office. I will work with all the VPs of finance at the campuses. And they will work with whoever they need to on their campus. And we do that as much as humanly possible. Again, things happen really fast during session, so we might not have time in every single instance, but we do that whenever we can. As far as keeping in contact with individual board members and the board, as I mentioned, we'll give you updates every meeting. We'll have special meetings if we need to. But if there's a bill that comes up that maybe is a K-12 related bill, we might read, and it's assigned to Lisa Johnson. She may reach out to Member Louders to get her input on a K-12 bill. Or if it's an IT bill, we might reach out to various board members so that we always have been maintaining some contact with the board throughout the whole process as much as humanly possible. And that may involve testimony. Right now, what we know for sure is the board chair we would want him to testify on the appropriations bill, for example. But there might be other bills where we need board members to come in and testify, and we'll work with you on those as much as, whenever we need that. So we might need your help, is what I'm saying. And so we'll ask for that when we need it. And during the session, you might get contacted by media. I mean, that happens fairly frequently. One thing we've done in the past is that the chair speaks for the board. So what we've done in the past, and if that's the same process you want to follow, is if you get media calls or anything like that, we always refer it back to the chair, unless the chair has designated it to someone else on a particular issue or for a particular time. So that's how we would handle those types of inquiries. That just helps us keep a united message and a consistent message throughout the process. And that's our process that we have to follow. We're preparing various documents right now. We're preparing budget documents. We'll talk about that later. We've got a snapshot, 2-page front and back document we'll be able to hand out to legislators and others that gives all the highlights on higher ed, the whole system, not just our office, of course, but it's the whole system. So we'll get that out to you as well so you can share that. And we'll just do our best as much as we can to communicate with you during the process. Are there any questions?
Is the booklet out that identifies all the legislators and where they're from? Is that published yet?
I have not seen it yet, but we will get copies of it. I think we might have already ordered them. I think we had to order them ahead of time, so we will get those to you as well. It's a very helpful booklet.
Very good. Thank you, Tammy.
Chair Morton, just a quick question or comment for Tammy. So thank you for leading us through this because it's a challenging time, right? Staff did participate in some various meetings last legislative session, and we're willing to participate in that to get updates and contribute and help participate where we can as well too. So give us a call if you need it.
We definitely will. We'll call on faculty, staff, and if there are meetings we can attend to keep your various groups informed, we're very willing to do that. We might, depending on schedules, but we'll make sure someone's there whenever you invite us.
Yeah, same thing here. I mean, my major reason to talk to the faculty was so I can represent them better at SBHE, obviously. But I did have it in the back of my mind that this is something that one could also use to testify at some point. And I had talked to Phil about it, and maybe the three of us can do, I mean, whatever fits into your into your topic and the way you decide that. I'm definitely happy to join in. And if you need any other faculty, just let me know.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the offer. We'll take you up on it.
Good.
Anybody else? We will move on to item number 12. The federal government has something new for us. Eric?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Morton. And my colleague, Chris Pesky, who you'll recognize from previous meetings, will be joining me for this section as well. On last September, so September of 2017, the United States Department of Education rescinded much of the Title IX guidance that had been issued over the years and issued interim guidance in the form of, I believe, a letter or a Q&A to campuses for continuing to process Title IX complaints internally. They promised to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking within 6 months. So fast forward 14 months to November 16th of this year, the federal government issued a notice of proposed rulemaking on Title IX. It's a 149-page document, so it's of that around 130-ish pages are preamble and explanation. And that document was published in the Federal Register on November 29th, which means that there's a 60-day comment period under the Administrative Procedures Act, meaning that the deadline to submit any comments would be January 23rd of 2019. Since this notice of proposed rulemaking was received, myself, my colleague, Mr. Pesky, Ms. Fitzsimmons, the Director of Student Affairs in the NDUS office, and among many other staff members have participated in various informational sessions, including a November 20th session with the National Association of College and University Attorneys, and I believe TICSA has had several pieces of information issued as well. As part of our goal to educate stakeholders on this proposed rulemaking, Chris and I have also spoken with the Chancellor on numerous occasions. I presented to the Academic and Student Affairs Committee on November 28th, and to the Human Resources Committee, or Human Resources Council on December 4th. And then earlier this week, I gave a brief summary to CCF as well. And then also on December 4th, Chris and I gave a presentation and discussion with the Systems Title IX Task Force. In the future, we'll also be bringing this to the Academic Affairs Council on January 3rd and to Chancellor's Cabinet on January 9th. So there will be a continuing dialogue about these changes. And while there is I prepared a 4-page summary that was attached to the agenda, and we're going to hit some of the high points here, but it's a incredibly long and detailed set of regulatory changes. And so we're going to hit some of the more significant ones, but there's a lot more there. Chris and I are, of course, happy to answer any questions after this presentation and as any questions may occur either on your campuses or to you as you continue to participate in this process. At a 30,000-foot view, the notice of proposed rulemaking was intended to create additional due process protections for students and students, staff, and faculty members that were accused of violating Title IX's prohibitions on sexual harassment. And that has been an area where campus administrative proceedings have been subject to some concern over the last period of time. So this notice of proposed rulemaking significantly changes the processes that were put in place at that time. The first point that I'm going to hit is just the fact that this notice of proposed rulemaking significantly changes the coverage of Title IX, which it has narrowed the definition of covered sexual harassment under Title IX to 3 items: an employee of the institution conditioning the provision of an aid, benefit, or service of the recipient being the institution, on an individual's participation in unwelcome sexual conduct, unwelcome conduct on the basis of sex that is so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it effectively denies the person equal access to the institution's educational program or activity, or criminal sexual assault. And the second item is where the significant narrowing of the definition has come. That effectively borrows language from workplace, hostile environment, and harassment case law, and incorporates that into Title IX. And that follows the lead of a couple appellate courts across the country that have taken that step. Another change to the coverage of Title IX under these regulations would be that the institution must have actual knowledge of alleged sexual harassment before it is able to open an investigation. And actual knowledge constitutes notice to a Title IX coordinator or any official with authority to institute corrective measures. So a faculty member, for example, who doesn't have the authority to make those changes, or a staff member who also doesn't have authority to make those changes, hearing about an allegation of sexual harassment would no longer constitute notice to the institution of a Title IX alleged violation. And so for example, and also constructive notice would no longer be sufficient to give rise to a Title IX proceeding. Also, under the proposed regulations, Title IX will no longer cover allegations of sexual harassment which do not occur on campus or as part of an educational program or activity of the institution. So, for example, there's now a ban on the institution is no longer empowered to institute Title IX proceedings based on conduct that occurs out of the United States. So, for example, in a study abroad program or a school-sponsored trip, something of that nature. And also, there is a significant gray area under these regulations as to what would happen with respect to allegations regarding off-campus activities that are not directly part of the school's educational activities or programs, such as a fraternity house or a off-campus party or something of that nature. And so then, I'm then going to move on to talk about sort of some of the changes to the investigational process. And I'll ask Chris to sort of possibly expand on this in a few moments. But one of the large changes to this that would be caused by this notice of proposed rulemaking, if it was to go into effect, would be the end of the single investigator model of Title IX investigations. Additionally, the school has an interim step that once a formal complaint is filed by the complainant in a Title IX proceeding, the school must examine that complaint to determine if the conduct alleged would constitute sexual harassment under the new regulations. And if not, the institution must dismiss the formal complaint with respect to the conduct that does not meet the definition under Title IX. There's also some significant changes to access to the proceedings and advisors. Currently, in many procedures, well, a student is entitled to obtain an attorney or an advisor to assist with the process, that the participation of that advisor is limited. That would change. Under the circumstances, the advisor would have full participation in the pre-hearing procedure, and it would also, and that individual would also be involved in the hearing itself. That the hearing itself is another major change, which is that a live hearing is now required as part of every Title IX disciplinary procedure or administrative procedure. And the one concern for the system is that those advisors must be as part of the fundamental fairness and due process must be functionally equal from the campus's perspective. So if one student obtains an attorney to act as their advisor in the process, the school would be required to appoint an attorney to assist the other student in the process. That's one of the major changes in this, is that the school is now required to to ensure that both students have an advisor during the Title IX administrative process. And there's also a long list of procedural protections that I'm not going to go through step by step here, but that is another significant change. And then with respect to the practical implications, the proposed regulations will require significant revisions of training materials, policies, and procedures at the campus level, along with creating enhanced record-keeping procedures. There will also likely be the need to hire additional personnel to deal with complaints. Then there will be a requirement to invest in additional technology and facilities potentially to provide non-downloadable electronic access to evidence, to provide separate rooms with real-time video and audio equipment for the purpose of the required live cross-examination during these hearings. Finally, the proposed regulations will also require locating, training, and compensating advisors for the parties during the process. And to the extent that this ends up involving attorneys, that is a significant concern from our perspective, both at the Attorney General's office and from the system office, because there is a lack of Title IX trained attorneys in the state of North Dakota, particularly in the western half of the state. And so with that, I'll turn to Chris for any edification that he may have about sort of how this will affect our policies and procedures or the campuses as they currently exist.
Thank you, Chair Morton, members of the board. I represent 7 of the smaller schools. I think this would require basically overhauling the Title IX policies and procedures for each of those schools. I can't speak to necessarily to UND and NDSU. They have a larger dedicated Title IX department and more staff. And so I believe their procedures are a bit different. But I know at all of the schools I represent, there's currently issues with just having enough people who are trained in Title IX to help with these processes, to be investigators, to potentially be adjudicators, now to be advisors, because everybody's wearing multiple hats. I think 2 of the schools I represent have a person who's dedicated as a Title IX coordinator, who that's their only job, maybe only one of them. But all the other Title IX coordinators are filling multiple roles. So then you'd need to have the help of staff and faculty who would be willing to participate in this process, and if they are going to participate, they have to be trained. So that's additional time, additional money from each of these campuses. And it would be probably longer investigative processes than are currently occurring, because on the smaller campuses, you engage in these processes less often because you have fewer students. But each time you engage in the process, you need to provide all those procedural safeguards. And it's kind of starting the engine up again when you don't necessarily have the car running all the time, because you're not constantly doing these hearings like you would at a larger school. So it would be significant changes, almost wholesale changes for most, if not all, of our campuses, and significantly increased need for trained personnel.
And so a quick note, the My office, the Attorney General's office, we have been in contact with the State Bar about this. We spoke with Tony Weiler, who's I believe, the Executive Director of the State Bar. And he was, at that time, this was a couple weeks ago, he was not aware of the significance of these changes. They were pretty fresh at that point. And he couldn't give us any information as to the availability of Title IX trained attorneys in the state. And he did say that he would look into it and get back to us, and we haven't heard since then. With respect to the prospective of these regulations, as I said, the process will play out over the next few months. The deadline for comment is January 28th of 2019, and then the Department of Education is required to take those comments into effect, or into consideration, and then we'll issue a notice of final rulemaking at some point in the future, and then there will likely be a legal challenge to the regulations. So it's impossible to predict if or when these will ever take effect, but it's because there are such significant changes, we felt that it was important to bring this to the board's attention. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Talk about comment.
Go ahead.
And Ms. Fitzsimmons said we should talk about the comment process. We've discussed with senior staff and the Title IX Task Force, and we'll be discussing with each of the other constituent groups whether to provide a comment to the Department of Education on these, how that process would work, in what form that may take. There are other kind of umbrella organizations like the American Council on Education that will be providing comment. We're monitoring that. But then it's a question for the system as a whole, and then each of the institutions. Do we want to provide a comment? If so, what do we say? And do we want to join in with other groups who are putting together comments and try to sign on with those? But that's an ongoing process that we're monitoring and communicating with all the stakeholders on.
Chair Morton?
Yes.
Chair Morton and Eric and Chris, what's involved in the training for an attorney to become certified as a Title IX lawyer?
At this time, there's no formal training, there's no formal certification, but there would need to be some amount of training in Title IX in order to be certified for there to be considered due process under these regulations. There are specific training requirements.
Who offers it and how long does it take?
It's offered by a number of third-party groups. It's fairly expensive, but it's not a large amount of time that it takes to do these trainings. I can probably defer that to our Director of Student Affairs in the system office, Ms. Fitzsimmons, to comment on that.
Well, and I can provide a comment with my experience with some of these individual cases. Students are always allowed to bring in an attorney. That attorney will undoubtedly be more familiar with the civil and criminal court process, which differs from the administrative Title IX process. Often attorneys who come in are not aware of those differences, so it's a process of working through how it all works with everyone. So I would say there is probably not a Title IX certification for attorneys. There is for Title IX coordinators and investigators, things like that. But it's when attorneys who aren't trained, who don't have Title IX training come into the process, it becomes confusing for everybody.
Well, I'm just wondering if the Bar Association could offer a CLE, or if it's something that's longer or larger than a CLE can encompass, because we have lawyers that are certified mediators and neutrals that attend week-long courses in order to become certified for doing that. We have people that are certified lawyers and non-lawyers that either the judicial branch or the State Bar Association trains to handle family law mediation. So if the North Dakota Bar needs to respond, I'm sure that they can do that, but we may need to provide some type of guidance as to where a lawyer could go to get the training needed to develop some awareness of the process.
And Member Trina, that's been part of our office's discussion with the State Bar as well, to see what those resources may need to be, and that's an ongoing conversation at this time.
And with regard to like neutrals and things like that, the judicial branch maintains a roster of those individuals. And so we could probably start developing a roster of Title IX qualified or educated or trained lawyers.
Yes. Is your mic on?
Okay, thank you. Stated again, this is huge. It's taken us a lot of years to get to where we are with Title IX, our process and our procedures, and this is a huge change. And my view is, just like all the stuff that comes out of Washington, D.C., the rural states, we're going to get hit hardest with this stuff. If we were Cal State system, it'd be a lot easier we'd have more flexibility to do this stuff. But this is going to be a very, very heavy lift. My point I'm getting at is that Chris had anticipated my question by saying, well, we're watching closely about the comment, but do we have a strategy into whether or not we are, as a state, going to comment on this? Can we get our DC delegation involved in writing letters and addressing those things that are going to be, that are going to have a tremendous financial impact on us as we move forward to this? So is there a strategy, and I don't know if the lawyers or the chancellor, is there a strategy to actually respond? Because January 20th, I think Eric said, or
January 28th.
January 28th is going to be on us like this. Is there a strategy for us to provide comments back to the Department of Education on these changes?
So Chairman Morton and members of the committee, my name is Katie Fitzsimmons, and I serve as the Director of Student Affairs, and I help with the Title IX Task Force. On our call on Tuesday, there were 9 of our campuses that were present on the call, and all 9 of them agreed that they would prefer to submit some kind of comment, or at least investigate providing comment in the comment period. Like you pointed out, the timeline is really tough as far as if this would be a comment, would it be something that comes from the state board, something from each campus individually, something from the system office that is on behalf of all the campuses? If it was from the board, that would need to be approved and worked through the process, and our timeline would get really, really crunched in getting it in on time? Or would we piggyback on the comment of a different educational group, campus, or entity? Like Eric had mentioned, if this goes into effect, or when it does go into effect, or it passes the next level, there will most definitely be lawsuits from many different organizations and activist groups for various reasons. But the financial implications on our campuses, simply with the staffing and the technology needs, one of them in there is that all materials of evidence would need to be provided to both parties 10 days after the investigation is completed, or they would get 10 days for review before they would move on to the next step in the process. And those electronic materials cannot be downloadable and cannot be able to be shared, but we all have cell phones right in front of us right now that can take pictures and take screenshots of everything. So I don't know what that would look like. If this is a Mission Impossible, this information is going to self-combust in 10 seconds after transmission, or what, but whatever it is, it's going to be expensive and it's going to be difficult to implement on all of our campuses. If anything that did come out of our Tuesday call with the task force, and that was made perfectly evident, was the task force is able to offer some great resources to the smaller campuses. For example, some staff from BSE have been at another campus helping with the Title IX investigation right now. That some of the smaller campuses run out of staff. They run out of people that can be involved with an investigation. There's too much overlap. And also a lot of time crunch on what their time is spent upon. And so if anything, the possibility of these regulations going through show how much more unified the system needs to be in regards to Title IX investigations. Like Chris pointed out, some campuses might only have 1 or 2 complaints come forward a year, and it is starting up that cold engine every single time. And this can help with getting more people involved that might be a little bit more well-versed and been through the process a little bit more often. So if we are going to provide comment, it's going to need to happen very quickly. And we're at this point, I don't know exactly what the campuses really want to do. If we want to tag on to what the American Council of Education is going to provide, or other Title IX administrator groups are going to provide, but they most definitely want our needs known on the national level.
Chancellor?
Yes, and thank you, Ms. Fitzsimmons. Great summary. So a lot of work's been gone. I don't know how many meetings we've already had with lawyers. I'm a commissioner at the American Council of Education. I was just actually with the policy director just last week on this IT initiative. So the thought is, unless the presidents want to do otherwise, like we've done on a lot of these things, we can sign on with the ACE letter, which will be well-researched and will have lots of lawyers and resources we don't have. We can have a system perspective given the overview, and then we'd certainly welcome if any individual president would also want to have, due to their unique circumstances, because let's face it, the situation at UND and NDSU is quite different than Williston. So, so I could see several of those levels. As far as getting the state board to make a formal vote, my only concern is this is somewhat of a politically charged issue coming from, the Trump administration with certain viewpoints, and having the board jump into that on anything other than the logistical difficulty of implementing this. I'm not sure I'd recommend that, but we're certainly open to presidents if they would want to comment here on this issue, since you're the ones most affected by it. So, would you want the board to make a vote?
I think Larry raises a good point to get our federal delegation engaged. But today we wanted to start the dialogue. We're not going to solve anything today, but the dialogue has to start, and it's going to continue on each of your campuses, and it's probably going to be an agenda item at every board meeting for many, many months now. My first thought is maybe we need to get more attorneys on the board. Birgit?
Yeah, I do appreciate all the comments I've heard so far. There's one aspect that I want to bring up that I think is important that we haven't touched yet, and that is the people in question. If I look at this shortened list of what constitutes sexual harassment and the fact that the victim needs to be open to being cross-examined and all those kinds of things, and I'm wondering whether we may still have any cases left that we'll have to process. I think that it'll be a big barrier for the victims to even come forward. And I think that's something that maybe we should put in there too. Of course, it's about money, but it's not just about money. It's about people also.
Andy?
Thank you, Chair Morton. Chris brings up, I think, a good point that there are some staff and faculty that are just not, versed well enough in this, and that's another burden upon them to have to understand this and have to be able to investigate, and they're already taxed as it is, and it happens once a year or something like that. So I think we need to, I'm glad that we're paying attention to this, I really am, but I think we need to keep in mind that the people that are working at the campuses are not the experts when it comes to some of this, and we need to look at experts down the road, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick?
Thanks, Chair Morton. Chris, what are other states doing to collect information internally? Have we reached out to the South Dakota Board of Regents, maybe your counterparts? Are they collecting information and feedback as a state? Sounds like there's a lot of states that are everybody's going to be dealing with the same thing. So, can we kind of figure out maybe what everybody's doing just to collect information first and begin to process what the changes really mean?
Member Hacker, Chair Warren, to answer your question right now, I don't know. I think it's so new that everyone's kind of scrambling right now, but that's certainly something we should do to follow that process, see what other states in our region and other similarly situated states are doing.
Yeah, my sense is the campuses are looking for some leadership from the system office for the direction to go for at least collecting and developing what the response might be, if any response at all. So we're also members of a couple of regional organizations like MEC and WICHE. There's probably a forum to figure out what other states are doing so it's organized and so that we gather input and find the appropriate response and avenue to providing that feedback. My sense is the institutions are probably sitting here saying, what do you guys want us to do? And so we need to probably, as a system, step forward and say, let's start with figuring out what other folks are doing, other states, and help provide just some guidance so we can collect the right information first.
And it sounds like that has started.
On the Title IX task force call a couple days ago, we did request that the Title IX officials that were on those calls from the various campuses begin collecting information so they can provide that to us in the system office so we can determine the best way to provide that information to both the system and to anyone who may be looking to comment either individually or at an institution.
Thank you. Let's.
Chair Morton, I think Ashley's got a comment.
Okay, Ashley?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's just really important to remember that the students should really be listened to on this, because as much as it's going to put weight on the campus, at the end of the day, there are students that feel very well represented in the current system, and then there are students who are feeling very overwhelmed by the current system, and there's obviously not a good solution for them, especially at small campuses where they don't have advisors that they can turn to. So this is clearly addressing a serious problem on both ends, and so there's both sides of students that are going to be affected. And as scary as it is, I encourage all campus presidents to actually talk to their students about how they feel about this, because you're going to have students on both sides, and it will probably get emotional and probably get intense, but you're going to have students on both sides that are going to feel very strongly about the new rules and changes that are coming in. And they're the ones that are going to be affected truly, because even if most students can't afford a lawyer, maybe their parents can, but even having that additional advisor might make a change. So as strenuous as it is on the staff, I highly recommend that everyone reach out to whether at a local campus or statewide, or attend an NDSA meeting and really speak to individuals and students about how this will truly affect them, because this is the students on the day-to-day basis that this will really be changing their campus life for.
Thank you, Ashley.
Chair Morton,
Yes.
I move that the Chancellor be empowered and directed to identify the potential administrative issues and costs that may occur to the North Dakota University system, and communicate those to North Dakota's congressional delegation, and further that the Chancellor identify among the regional or national organizations the position that those organizations are taking, and upon consultation with the chair, take an action on join in one or more of those statements on behalf of the North Dakota University system.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Can you what?
Hear that again.
You expect me to repeat that?
Yeah,
All right.
it was lengthy. Sorry.
Can we, in the interest of time,
Essentially,
could you
that
do
the
off-
Chancellor have the, go ahead.
She can get that information offline in the interest of time?
What's that?
I can distribute it. I'll get it from Dan and distribute it.
Yeah, I didn't read it. I just made it up as I went. I'm a lawyer. I do this all the time. So essentially, the Chancellor is empowered and directed to identify the concerns, administrative concerns and costs that may impact the university system in North Dakota, communicate that to our congressional delegation. And further, that he look at the positions being taken by, I think it's WICHE and the other organization, ACE, study those, consult with the chair of our board, and upon consultation and approval of the chair of our board, take a position on behalf of the university system.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Just one comment to adjust expectations. We had something on DACA at Wichita that got very problematic. So getting California, Oregon, and Washington to agree on the same thing as South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, we may not have a consensus. I just want to be sure you know that we may get consolidated opinion on some of these. So.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes?
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset, are you on the line?
Yes, and I vote yes. Yes.
Thank you. Board Chair Morton?
Yes. Welcome Kathy Nessett to our meeting. She's a very busy woman. I think she just finished a Federal Bank Reserve meeting in Minneapolis. Is that correct, Kathy?
That is correct. I'm still in Minneapolis. So, yes, I'm glad to join you. Thank you very much, Chair Morton.
Thanks for
and
joining us.
apologize I'm not there in person.
Thank you for joining us. And we will move on to item 13. Eric.
So item number 13 is an update on the status of the labor complaint filed by Dr. Lisa Feltner with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. That process has been ongoing for around a year now, a little bit less, I think. And that process concluded with an order issued on November 21st, 2018, when the EEOC issued a dismissal and notice of rights. And pursuant to that document, the EEOC closed its file on the investigation and issued the following determination. And I quote, "Based upon its investigation, the EEOC is unable to conclude that the information obtained establishes violations of the statutes. This does not certify that the respondent is in compliance with the statutes. No finding is made as to any other issues that might be construed as having been raised by this charge." And this follows a similar determination by the North Dakota Labor Commission, or by the Department of Labor, with respect to a similar complaint that was filed. And so at this point, the EEOC portion of this proceeding has concluded, and Dr. Feltner has 90 days from the receipt of that notice, which, based on what we have heard, was on November the 27th, which means that the 90-day period would conclude on February the 25th of 2019. And so until that time, this matter is not completely resolved, but there have been media reports that Dr. Feltner will not be pursuing suit, but until that deadline is passed, nothing is certain. At this point, I will take any questions as to the procedure, timing, things of that nature with respect to this matter. And if any questions do relate to matters that would need to be covered in executive session, I'll defer to that executive session.
Hearing none.
Thank you. Then that concludes item 13.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is an executive session for attorney consultation related to the discrimination and labor complaint filed by Dr. Lisa Feltner with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the potential for a subsequent lawsuit. This item may be discussed in an executive session. The legal authority for closing this portion of the meeting is North Dakota Century Code Section 44-04-19.2 and 44-04-19.1. At this time, a motion would be in order to discuss this topic in executive session rather than in an open meeting. Is there a motion?
Chair Morton, I move to enter executive session for attorney consultation as described by the chair and on the agenda, and to limit the executive session to voting board members, non-voting advisors, and the executive assistant to the board and the board's legal counsel.
Thank you, Jill. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Mr. Trainer,
Yes.
Miss Nesset,
Yes.
Miss Thornton,
Yes.
Miss Louders,
Yes.
Mr. Hacker,
Yes.
Dr. Ryan,
Yes.
Board Chair Morton.
Yes. At this point, I'll defer to Board Counsel Eric for a further introductory statement.
Just to clarify at the beginning of this, before we go into executive session, this will be a narrow executive session limited to providing legal advice and guidance regarding the matter the chair described a few minutes ago. Any questions received and answered given in the executive session which do not constitute statutory attorney consultation will be placed on the public record at the conclusion of the executive session. The executive session will be recorded, and all members of the governing body are reminded to limit their discussion to the announced topic. Any collective decision, collective commitment, or any other final action must occur after the board reconvenes in an open meeting unless final action is specifically required by law to be taken during the executive session. The prohibition on taking final action during the executive session does not apply to providing guidance or instructions to an attorney or negotiator. And I understand that the executive session will take place in room 432.
The
Someone
board-
can correct me if that's,
Yeah.
someone can correct me if that's incorrect.
432. The board will now enter executive session. We anticipate adjourning the executive session and reconvening the open portion of this meeting in approximately 15 minutes. And we're going to work very hard to stick to that schedule. Thank you. Just as an FYI, we just broke our record for the shortest executive session. We did it in 8 minutes. It helped that the chancellor wasn't there. Just kidding. Just kidding.
My tip.
We are now into item 15, and I'll call on the chair of our finance committee. Budget and finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We didn't put item 15A or B onto the consent agenda as a committee, simply because there are larger topics and larger dollar amounts to be spoken about. And so the first item, 15A, and Tammy, can you confirm that Rick Tonder's on the line?
Rick, are you on?
Sure, members of the committee, I am.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rick, for being available. The 15A is a request by the University of North Dakota to issue up to $25 million in revenue bonds to complete deferred maintenance and needed necessary repairs of their parking facilities across campus. And the way they would service those bonds is through increasing is by obtaining an average increase. They may charge different rates for different parking areas, but generating an average increase of about $130 some odd, Jed, to service those bonds to make those repairs and realignment of their parking situation, which is less than ideal with the way it's structured for where and how people park at different locations across the campus. With that, Rick Tonder will entertain any questions.
Any questions of Rick or Nick?
Board Chair Morton, and as Casey, I would move approval of the $25 million capital project request by UND for infrastructure parking.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion?
Chair Morton, just a comment that I understand there's the needs of parking infrastructure on the campuses and updates and stuff like that, but I think that there are some that are concerned that the cost structure may appear to be unfair to those that are in the lower end of the scale of salaries. And so I just use that as an example that we, keep that in mind.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes. Did you cover B also?
Mr. Chair, 15B, it's a little bit different of a topic. This is a request by UND to seek statutory language change to allow the North Dakota University system to access the North Dakota infrastructure revolving loan fund that is currently available to political subdivisions to provide for low interest financing of infrastructure improvements. This would primarily be streets, gutters, sanitary sewer, and that type of infrastructure. With that, I'll defer to any of the other committee members to talk further about it. This one didn't come out unanimous. I was a no vote, so I prefer not to.
Chair Morton,
Dan?
I move approval of 15B.
Is there a second?
I'd second that. Casey?
Been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion?
Yeah, Chair Morton, 15B provides political subdivisions in the state of North Dakota, counties, cities, and other units of government are authorized under state law to apply for low-interest financing from the State Bank of North Dakota. And as a result, they are able to make improvements to their infrastructure. Some of our universities are larger than political subdivisions in the state of North Dakota, yet they don't have that same authority. It has resulted in some situations in the University of North Dakota where they have to cooperate with the city of Grand Forks and take some actions that that frankly the universities should be able to do on their own, because they have some streets and roads and things like that that they need to attend to. And so what the University of North Dakota requested is a statutory change that would allow universities, colleges in North Dakota that have infrastructure needs to be able to utilize this revolving loan fund that is available to political subdivisions. The reason why I supported it as a board member of the Budget and Finance Committee is we own the Bank of North Dakota as taxpayers. We also own the university system. It's good business to do business in the bank that you own, and so we should utilize the power of our own state-owned bank to finance infrastructure projects at our universities.
Dan, do we need legislative approval to use this mechanism?
Yes, we would need legislative approval that would either embrace the universities as political subdivisions. That's one possible way that they could do it. They could also create a separate revolving loan fund that would be applicable to universities, although I think that may be less likely. I think if they do identify universities as participants in the revolving loan fund, they may need to increase the size of that. I don't know. I think that there's a certain amount that each political subdivision is eligible for or may be eligible for, but I think that it's a good move for the university system to utilize the power and benefits of the state-owned Bank of North Dakota.
Any other discussion? President Kennedy?
Chair Morton, members, this was one of the assignments I got in SPOLS, was to look at innovative ways to try to deal with our infrastructure needs. We have floated this idea with several legislators and so far not gotten any serious pushback. So we'd be happy to work with the system office to try to see what language would need to be done and work with the legislators to see if we can't get this enacted in the upcoming legislative session with the approval of the board, of course, pending the approval of the board.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Chair Morton, my concerns with proceeding down this path are not significant, number one. But really the challenge is the lack of information of understanding what it means to be considered a political subdivision for a university. If there are implications, I don't know. And the other was, it's a revolving loan fund, which has a requirement to be repaid. Political subdivisions have taxing authority, they have assessing authority, they have other ways to pay for streets and roads and to pay those loans back. And it was not clear to me of what our source of repayment would look like, nor was it explained of what the need was, dollar amount. I don't know what the need was for streets, roads, sewer. It kind of came together very last minute. So without those pertinent information, and also we didn't have an opportunity to hear from the Bank of North Dakota of how the revolving loan fund works. So I felt there was a lack of information to make a prudent decision on supporting. It very may well turn out to be a great tool, and I appreciate the university and President Kennedy for being innovative at looking at these ideas.
Dan, do you have any further comments after hearing that?
No, as I said, this is something that really the legislature, the Bank of North Dakota, and the universities will need to flesh out. I don't think that we're talking about making universities political subdivisions with taxing authority, although they are government entities and do charge fees, so that is somewhat of a tax. But I do think that they should utilize the benefits of the Bank of North Dakota, and if we're going to borrow money, we might as well borrow it from ourselves.
Are there any other presidents that have a comment? Tammy?
I realize I'm not a president, Chair Morton, but I just wanted to point out, after the Budget Finance Committee meeting met and approved this, if you look at agenda item number 11, there, if you open that up, there is a link to a bill, what could be a bill draft that we could pre-file with the Legislative Council. I mean, with the approval of the board, actually, we would want the approval of the board first. It's drafted the way I understood the committee was talking about proceeding. The issue with that is today is the pre-file date. So if the board would like me to submit that version of the bill, I would need approval today, and I would need to forward it today. I just wanted to bring that to your attention that we do have a bill draft if the committee wants to consider it.
And
Or the board.
Chair Morton and Tammy, thank you. In looking at this is a simple statutory change. It doesn't make the universities or state institutions of higher education political subdivisions. It just adds them to the revolving loan fund so that they can utilize it. So this is about as simple as it gets, and it looks like a good bill to me.
Do other campus presidents see a benefit for their institution? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is obviously new to a lot of us, but I know a number of us, as well as a number of our sister institutions, are looking at some P3 options for infrastructure and renovation. And I think there could be possibilities there that would be very, very favorable for us moving forward with some of those activities and take an awful lot of pressure off the capital requests that go to the legislature every year.
Thank you, John. Any other presidents want to speak to impacts on your campus, either good or bad? Tom?
Thank you, Chair Morton. I cannot think of a project where we would need this directly right now, but to have the opportunity to look more fully into the possibilities can't hurt anything. To have one more option at which we can look to help with these types of projects is, I think, a good thing.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Mr. Hacker?
No.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
No.
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes. I was trying to count. What was the number?
5-2.
2. Passed.
We're missing.
Tammy, you can leave if you need to go write something.
Or Stevens missing.
Or it's already written. Okay. Chancellor?
Supportive of Member Hacker's point is that, you know, this came very late, right before Thanksgiving, and it is, you know, we applaud, again, President Kennedy's team being innovative, but we do want time to try to study these, and so I totally understand that 3 people voted against it, is that there could be some unintended consequences, and I would just hope that if we do discover those, you know, as we're filling these out, that we would come back to the board saying, oh, there was a little bit more to this than we thought, so.
Chair Morton?
Casey?
Question, do we need to do anything different to give support to Tammy to make the changes or additions? No. Thank you.
Just to add to that, so during this process of what's happening right now, because our budget bill or recommendation has been put in, the governor will he has his budget. There will be a higher ed funding bill, which there's 2 paths towards these initiatives. Either the institution or the system office and Tammy can find a legislator to sponsor a standalone bill, or we will pursue an amendment to the higher ed funding bill, which is what would happen here, likely. Tammy, is that what your sense is? We would look for an amendment on the higher education funding bill to include this authorization, or would you look for a standalone bill?
The
you
bill,
pre-file this one. Great.
pre-fill the bill draft today. It's ready to go. I've had the AG's office look at it too. So I would pre-file it if that's your direction.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Okay, we will move on to item 16. Katie?
Chair Morton and members of the committee, I am presenting some information on behalf of Vice Chancellor Lisa Johnson today. The first item is State Board Higher Education Policy 409, the Degrees Offered Policy. It contains proposed edits to move much of the descriptive language regarding specific degrees to the corresponding procedure with the intent of listing each institution and types of degrees that each is permitted to offer. The purpose of the proposed edits was to move descriptive information about the degree requirements to procedure from policy. It was assumed that the State Board may be interested in documenting the general levels or types of credentials awarded at each institution, for example, certificate, associate, or baccalaureate level, but didn't necessarily need to approve each degree name. So on November 7th, 2018, the Academic Affairs Council voted unanimously to recommend approval for review by the Chancellor's Cabinet and advance to the State Board for approval and denial. Are there any questions at this time?
Any questions of Katie? Want to move to item 17?
Certainly. Item 17 is Policy 440, the enrollment reporting. It contains proposed edits to be consistent with the IPED's definition of a degree-seeking student. The last paragraph is intended to define the number of semester hours that the North Dakota University system will use when describing the full-time enrollment of undergraduate and graduate students during the summer term. For added clarity in the policy, the definition of a degree-seeking student has been revised to match IPED's. Additionally, that last paragraph notes that the full-time requirement for summer credits varies by campus, but NDUS will define undergraduate students enrolled in 9 or more semester hours as full-time and graduate students as 6 or more semester hours at a time. On November 7th, the Academic Affairs Council voted unanimously to recommend approval for review of the Chancellor's Cabinet and advance to the State Board.
We do need a motion, and I think we can lump both items 16 and 17 together. Do we have a motion to approve?
Chair Morton, motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? Andy?
Just a quick comment that working with students in the summertime, the rules have been 12 credits to be full-time. I think this is a good thing to reduce that because oftentimes summer is a very accelerated semester, and doing 12 credits in the summertime is a lot. 9 credits is more manageable. Good job.
Are you speaking from experience?
Nope, took the summers off.
Further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes. Please proceed to item 18.
Item 18 is the proposed edits to State Board Higher Education Policy 403, the program approval. It has been rewritten to combine policies 403.1, 403.1.1, program termination, and 403.1.3. Inactive programs policies 403.1.1 and 403.1.3 would be deleted. Members of the Academic Affairs Council have worked closely with the North Dakota University system staff to streamline program approval, including State Board Higher Education guidance associated with program termination and the inactivation of the programs prior to termination. The intent of this is to collapse 3 individual policies into one single policy so that individuals don't have to look in multiple locations with redundant language to make a program change. Similarly, the Academic Affairs Council streamlined the corresponding procedures, moving some of the culminating level of approval to the Chancellor's Cabinet with quarterly updates to the State Board of Higher Education or the Academic and Student Affairs Committee. On October 3rd, the Academic Affairs Council voted unanimously to recommend approval for review, and the first read of this policy was on October 25th, 2018, in front of the board.
Thank you, Katie. Any questions?
Chair Morton, motion to approve second reading of Policy 403.1.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes.
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes. And we'll move to item 19. Eric?
I believe Dr. Ryan was speak to policy 605.
Thank you. Chair Morton, board members. We tabled this motion at the last meeting to get more input from faculty. In this process, there was a discussion with our chancellor, with Dr. Dragseth and Dr. Preuss, myself, and Eric Olson. And we have made some changes to the policy which we think would fit into a fair process. And really what fair to the group that discussed it, and I did discuss this also with Interim President Dahlberg after we had our discussion, and I also discussed it with President Mitchell and President Van Horn, because primarily they're affected. And overall, I think the change in this policy allows us to, when we're recruiting for new presidents, to be able to say up front that you'll be able to keep your tenure, and that at the same time, we put measures in on the back end, such as if there were issues with the presidents, they wouldn't necessarily be able to keep their tenure. It'd have to come back to this body. And in addition, there were some economic concerns raised by CCF, which were addressed as to putting the responsibility onto the university or college budget rather than to the department from which, or to which the tenured president may go back to. So I think overall, and I did hear Dr. Preuss talk earlier about it and discuss it with her and with Dr. Dragseth, that there are issues, but I think overall it's a fair process. I think that President Mitchell and President Van Horn deserve to be recognized for their tenure, and passing this would allow us to give them that tenure. I don't know if they need a separate motion, or if that motion would be needed to give it to them today, but they've earned it, and I don't ever anticipate that there would be a problem with any of our presidents that have tenure, but if there is, it would come back to this body before they would be put down or moved back, whatever term you want to use, to their respective college or university department within the university or college at which they were president. I think the other thing that with what we've done, it allows for professors with tenure in the state of North Dakota who want to make a move on up to an administrative position to feel that they're somewhat protected, that if they move to be a president, that they, if everything goes in a good way, they can go back and retain their tenure. So I think it gets rid of something that Board Member Trainer brought up at the last visit, that we're treating people from outside of the state of North Dakota differently than we're treating people within the state. And I think that was an issue that needed to be corrected. So with the language that is now within the tabled motion, which I would recommend that we pass it, I would move that we take 605.1 off being tabled.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we take it off the table.
Yes.
Discussion? Do we vote on this then?
I have.
Yes, there would be a roll call vote on the motion to remove from the table.
Okay, before we do the roll call vote, is there discussion?
Yes. Yes, there is. And just to make the point clear, I'm talking as an SBHE member now, not as a representative of CCF. I very much appreciate how much this policy has changed. It's come a long way, and I think it's much better. But before you vote, I would also appreciate if you remind yourself of the multiple concerns that the faculty still have. I think if this gets passed, it will still hurt the faculty.
Point of order, Chair, this is not a debatable motion.
Thank you.
It's debatable once we have it off the table, but it's not right now.
Okay, let's vote.
Ready? Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes.
Chair Morton, this is Casey. I would move that we advance a second reading on policy 605.1 as it has been recently amended.
Point of order, Chair. I think that's the motion that was taken off the table, so I don't believe we need a second motion, if that's correct, Eric.
To clarify, there would need to be a motion to amend the pending motion, or the pending motion would need to be withdrawn to insert the revised version of 605.1.
Okay. Well, I had the prior motion that is now off the table. I will withdraw the motion and let Casey make a new motion.
Okay. Thank you. I'll go back and say that I would move that we pass policy 605.1 as amended, and this would be the second reading of that policy.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We can now discuss. Any discussion?
I want to apologize for discussing this too early.
I would just offer, I think a person that is a president of an institution, of a campus, has been vetted so many times, particularly when they come out of the faculty or they're in administration. They started at a lower level job. They moved up through the system. Every move, every promotion, they got vetted. They get to be president. They come, we vet them again, we interview them, we put them in front of the community, we put them in front of the faculty. These guys have been vetted. And so I'm very much obviously in favor of tenure for our presidents.
My only question, Chair Morton, is that if this motion passes, do President Mitchell and President Van Horn automatically get tenure?
I'll defer to our attorney.
Dr. Ryan, because the language of the revised policy is the SBHE May Award, there would need to be a motion to award that tenure.
Thank you.
So do we have to vote on this? Then we can vote on.
There would need to be a vote on the pending motion to approve the revised version of 605.1 before we could proceed.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes.
Chair Morton, I would move that President Mitchell at Dickinson State University and President Van Horn at Mayville State University be granted tenure in the North Dakota higher education system.
Second that motion.
Been moved and seconded.
Point of order. Chair Morton, can we do that when it's not an agenda item?
Maybe it's not so good to have an attorney on the board.
Sorry. I mean, we can do it later, but I don't know that we can do it today.
Because this is a regular meeting. At any time, the agenda can be amended by motion. And while the agenda was previously approved by consent, it would be permissible for the board to move reconsideration of that motion and add to the agenda.
Thank you. Need a motion?
Chair Morton, I would move that we add to the agenda today the recognition of President Mitchell at Dickinson State University and President Van Horn at Mayville State University to be approved for tenure within the North Dakota university system.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes.
A question now, was that just a motion to put it on the agenda, correct? So I would go back to my previous motion that I made, which Christy knows, and would move that we recognize President Mitchell at Dickinson State University and President Van Horn at Mayville State University to grant them tenure within the North Dakota university system.
I'll second that.
From the Attorney General's office, those would need to be separate motions.
Separate for each individual?
That's correct.
Oh, okay, well, since President Mitzel was here first, I would move that President Mitzel be granted tenure within the North Dakota university system.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes.
Chair Morton, I would make a motion that President Van Horn at Mayville State University be granted tenure within the North Dakota university system.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Ms. Thornton?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Mr. Trainer?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes. Congratulations, gentlemen. Please do.
I would just like to voice my appreciation to the State Board of Higher Education as well as the CCF for the consideration of this request. As with all of our professionals on our State Board of Higher Education, it comes with credentials through your professional associations, and tenure is something that is respected. I think it puts us in a very relatable position with our faculty that we work with on a daily basis to accomplish the goals and the missions of the university. So I apologize it took so many motions for this, but I also would like to say thank you for your patience through this. As somebody who's come a long way to get to a place that I absolutely love, I appreciate the vote of confidence and the respect that was shown through this process. So thank you to all.
Thank you, Brian. Tom?
I would like to second much of what was said earlier on that aspect. I want to thank everybody for all of the hard work and the faculty for their input. Tenure is not to be taken lightly. It is a very long road to receive tenure, and I think it speaks to the strength of the NDUS system itself that two of us were willing originally to give up that tenure to join the system, and we are grateful that that tenure that was given up has been given back, and I think I can speak for both of us that we'll continue to work as hard as possible to keep the NDUS moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to item 20.
Thank you, Chair Morton. And I'm going to make it a little easier too, because I know this is an action item on the agenda, but I am going to ask you not to make any motions on the budget because the budget that I'm presenting you today, because I'm not really prepared to ask the board to take a position on the budget today. We simply haven't had time to fully analyze the entire governor's budget. We've looked at the institution's budgets, but we haven't had enough time since yesterday to look at in-depth, because it was a very comprehensive budget, and there are items in the Commerce budget and the Career and Technical Education Agency, and we haven't had a chance to look at ag research yet either. So I don't think that I'm ready to recommend you take an action. And at the same time, we also need to determine the potential impact of the 5% base budget reduction that was included in the budget. And that'll take some time for us to look at that. And we would need to evaluate which non-funded optional packages we would recommend to you that we continue to pursue. But with that said, I think it's fair to say that I am pleased with the recommendation for a couple of reasons. First of all, it did not, while it had a base budget reduction, It was not nearly as large as was originally contemplated. At the time the guidelines came out, we were talking 10% or 13%. In the budget that's the governor proposed, that reduction is actually 5%. So that's significantly better than when we were starting off the process this spring. And the other thing I'm extremely pleased with is that the governor did prioritize salary increases and maintaining benefits, the existing benefits for state employees. I mean, that was very good to see. As I said, my concerns really lie in the impact of that 5% reduction. And that's mostly because it comes on top of the 17% reduction that we took this biennium. And so we need some time to evaluate how we'll be able to continue to provide that quality education to the students in our system, as well as to maintain and compensate and retain our current employees. So I think this budget overall is a good starting point, or a really good starting point, and I look forward to working with the legislature as they develop their budget over the next few months. So with that said, you'll find an attachment to the agenda, and I want to thank Dave Krebsbach for this. We spent, mainly Dave, when I say we, I mean mainly Dave, spent all of yesterday afternoon and late into the evening going through the budget documents and preparing the schedules that you see. And while we did our best to get everything in here, we might be off by $1 or $2 somewhere, but overall it's good. So we'll further clarify that as we go forward. But there is one correction I do want to point out on the very first page. If you look on the first page of the handout, you'll see the comparison of the needs-based budget that was submitted to the governor for his consideration. And in addition to that, of course, we had a number of optional requests that we were making. When the green box at the bottom of the page is the executive recommendation, and I'll walk you through some of the details of that. But what I want to correct is right above the total line, there's a line that says financial aid and CTS adjustments. That should read 5% base reduction. So we missed that when we were changing some of the formats. So that is the 5% base reduction that I'll explain more in a minute here. But just to look at these, the totals are right. So our budget, and when I say budget, I'm not talking right now about the one-time items that were provided. We'll talk about those in a minute, and there were several of those that were provided, but this is the ongoing base budget that the institutions and our office use to fund the daily operations and run the academic side of the business and the daily business. So if you look at those numbers, the general fund budget that was proposed is $618.5 million. That is the total all funds budget is $2.5 billion, which if you compare the two, just on the surface, it's very similar to the needs-based budget that we submitted, which, if as a reminder, did include a compensation package of 4% in each year of the biennium. So the major differences that the governor made is, of course, he removed the 4 and 4 that we asked for, but he replaced it with his own compensation package, which is he's proposing a 4% increase the first year of the biennium, and a 2% increase the second year of the biennium, and with another 2% that would be allowed to be given out to employees if the state agency or institution can identify permanent salary savings to cover that cost. So there's flexibility in there, but it also would have us look to save money in other places in order to give out that second 2%. There is also money in there to cover the cost of health insurance, but there's some slight changes to that, and honestly, that's one of the items I haven't had a lot of time to look at. So what I will say is they provided 3 alternatives, a couple of which include a employee participation in the price of the health insurance plan that they would be choosing. but I don't know enough yet to go into the details of that with you. And there's also an increase to the retirement contribution of 2%. 1% is would be funded by the state, and the other would be an employee contribution that would come out of their paychecks. So that's the compensation package that's included in the budget. If you look at the bottom schedule, you'll see the cost of those changes that I was just describing. It's the third line of numbers down, is approximately $72 million for higher ed. 25 million of that would he proposed be funded by the state. The other 2/3 would be funded by tuition and other funds, and that is similar to the current funding split of the system right now, and as far as we pay our employees. So that distribution of funds remained proportionate to what we do today. But then let's look at that bottom line that should say 5% base reduction. This was the first thing that the governor did, and I haven't had a chance to look through all the other budgets, but I do know for us it was a 5% reduction off of our base budget. And when they do those types of reductions, it's on the state funding side of it, so there are no tuition or other funds adjusted. But that would be a $27 million cut to our budget before we give out the compensation increases. And that's the number that we need to spend some time on to determine what does that mean. What would we need to do in order to make those cuts so that we are then able to give out the compensation package later. And again, this is the base budget. I won't talk about the one-time optional things yet. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to, got just a few more slides that gives you a little more detail by campus and by the system office. Does anyone have any questions now, or should I just keep going?
Nick, did you have a question? Anybody have any questions of Tammy?
Chair Morton and Tammy, what are the governor proposed a 4% first year and 2% for the second year of the biennium for pay increases. Is that correct?
Yes.
How does this process work then? Do we make a decision later to support it, or what have past boards done?
Yes, I'm asking for some more time before the board makes that decision. The board wouldn't have to take an official position on it.
Right.
It really is fairly close to our total needs-based budget. We wouldn't need an official position. We would tend to go in and we'll have to go in and explain the differences between what we requested and what we were given. And then we can explain the impact of those changes to the legislature, and then they would decide what they want to give us and what they don't.
But as I understand it, our needs-based budget asked for a 4 and 4.
It did. It did.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Nick.
And Tammy, that would be our current official position, is the 4 and 4 with the budget that was approved by the board at this stage.
That's correct. You're correct, Chair Hacker. That was the last official action that was taken. You're correct. Thank you. Okay, well, let's go on to page 2 then. And what we've done here is try to compare for each campus the base budget that was that the board approved in June. We backed out the salary increase amount because that was added in a different manner for the governor. We just wanted more of an apples to apples comparison there. But you can see in total for the campuses, our base budget, if you don't consider the salary increase that we asked for, was about $516 million. The base budget reduction, the 5%, is approximately $25 million cut. So those are the cuts that would need to be made to the budgets before anything else would be decided. And then the cost of the executive compensation package that I described for the institutions is approximately $23 million. And with that, it brings us to what the executive recommendation is, which is just about $515 million. And this, again, I want to remind you, is the general fund ongoing part of the budget. It's not any one-time items. Are there any questions on that? The next page is the system office budget. We did the same type of comparison. You can go through if you want all the lines. I won't do that right now. The first line is the system governance line, and I'll just use that as an example. That is the costs that are for the running of the system office. So for our employees and all of the operating costs of the board, everything is built into there. For us, the 5% base reduction is about $374,000. The compensation package is $383,000, and that would bring our executive recommendation to just under $7.5 million. Core technology services, their 5% base reduction is just about $1.9 million. The compensation package is about $900,000. And their base budget would then be $37 million. And if you'll notice all the other lines, except for shared campus services at the very bottom, which is a pool of money we have to implement various shared services, those were all approved as we asked for them in June. So all of the scholarships, the grants, the EPSCoR research program, let's see, those were all funded as we requested, and that meant they were unchanged from the current biennium. So there's no cuts to any of those lines in the executive recommendation. So they would be stable. The next page is the similar comparison for the Forest Service. Their 5% reduction would be $220,000, and then the compensation package was added on as well. Starting on page 5.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Nick.
I just want one question as we hit this kind of stage, Tammy, and we don't need to spend a lot of time. Did the executive budget recommendation recommend the 5% cuts by institution plus CTS system office, these line items, or did it dictate across the board? Or does this board have the ability and flexibility to relocate those reductions within the suggested budget?
That's a good question, but the cuts were specific by institution and within those various appropriation lines, so they were specific. So now I'll be moving on to those optional adjustments that you had approved us to ask for. And I won't go through them in a lot of detail, but we do have them listed on here just for recall purposes. And you'll see that for the most part, none of them were funded, but there are a few, so we'll get to those in just a second. But this page lists those initiatives, such as the Campus Workforce Initiative Pool and the Research Initiative Pool, that were $15 million. The other initiatives that were related to the task force, the Senate Bill 2003 task force item, those are all listed there. We'd also asked for a pool of funds that was split between the institutions, $1 million per institution, to address specific needs that they might have in various areas. None of those were funded in the budget. You turn to page 6. This is where we start seeing some of the items that were added. So on the top, the system-wide technology initiatives, those were not funded within the budget. The additional positions we had asked for for workforce and research and academic programs were not approved. But there were a few items. You'll see $539,000 for the student loan for Connect ND, $465,000 for the professional student exchange program, and there was $500,000 for the tribal college grants that are given out for non-beneficiary students. Those three programs had money that had funding that came from the Student Loan Trust Fund in prior bienniums. The Student Loan Trust Fund does not have enough money anymore. So the governor has replaced those funds with general fund dollars. So those programs would stay whole, even though Student Loan Trust Fund monies aren't available. So that was a very good change. So they wouldn't see a cut in this budget. And in fact, the governor added money to the tribal college grants for non-beneficiary students. So he provided an additional $400,000 to that program. And what that does then is bring the funding for that program back up to $1 million, which is the level it was 2 bienniums ago before the budget cut. So that's a good, a very good thing for that program and for those colleges.
That was the one tribal college president asked, they were going to ask us for support for. So when they come back in January, the meeting, probably they'll ask us to support the governor on that.
Second to last line, we had asked that the money for the teacher shortage loan forgiveness program be moved to the Department of Public Instruction to better align with changes that were made in the statute of how that program is administered. And the governor did follow our ask there, and so that money has been moved to DPI at this time. And then we needed $2.9 million to make whole the academic and CTE scholarship line, and he did that as well, which is, there's a strong commitment in this budget to grants and scholarships and those types of programs, and it's very much appreciated. Now, if you look on page 7, these are governor's initiatives that are new money to our budget. They are one-time funding items, so they're not in the ongoing budget, but they are new money, and these are items that we hadn't included in our request. So these are good, very much appreciated initiatives that the governor is sponsoring. So he's provided a pool of funds, $5 million, for online curriculum development. As I understand it, we don't have all the specifics on a lot of these yet, but that would be a pool of money that would be in the system office that we would have to be allowed to distribute out to the institutions. And how that process would work, I don't know yet, but that would flow back to the institutions for online curriculum development. He did provide $750,000 to Dickinson State for the Theodore Roosevelt digitization project. That is not a new appropriation. They've actually gotten that for several bienniums now, but it's something that was always added later, and it's a very important project, and he funded it directly in his budget. The largest item on this list is $40 million, a $40 million investment for the Challenge Grant Program. And you are all fully aware of what a large difference that program has made for our institutions as far as funds that are now available for scholarships for all of our students and the other types of items that were funded with that money. It does require a 2-for-1 match, so that obviously would be multiplied and have a significant impact if this were to make it through to the legislative budget. So that's a large investment in higher ed. On the next pages, last 2 pages, were the capital projects that we had requested. You'll see 10 items there that, if you recall, were the highest deferred maintenance and critical life safety need type projects. They were the top 10. We asked for general fund dollars for those projects. There was no general fund dollars provided for any of those projects. However, if you look to the very last page, the top 2 projects did receive funding in a different, at different levels than we requested, but they did receive some funding from the SIF fund, or the state. I can never remember if it's investment in infrastructure and investment, but the state infrastructure fund, or called SIF. So Dunbar Hall at NDSU was a $51.3 million project. we'd asked for general fund dollars. The governor did fund that with 50% of it would come from the SIF fund, but NDSU would need to raise the other 50% in order to go forward with that project at that level. Valley City had the Foss Hall replacement project, which is their fine arts building, and they were going to take down 2 buildings and replace it with 1. That was not funded in that manner. What the governor did provide will be a total of $3.9 million to remodel McCarthy Hall on their campus. And $2.9 million of that money would come from the SIF fund, and $1 million of it would need to come from private donations. So it's definitely not a full replacement of Foss Hall, but it would allow McCarthy to be remodeled and address some building deficiencies that are in that building right now. And then the rest of the projects listed on here were the special fund projects that the board had approved to be asked for. All of those were approved in the governor's budget. So those will all be listed there, or all the ones listed there will be included in the bill when we receive it. Next steps are we'll be working with OMB and Legislative Council as they draft our appropriations bill. Again, we probably won't see that final bill until the beginning of January. And then we'll start the testimony process. In between there, we've already reached out to the campus finance folks. We'll be having meetings to talk about that, planned testimony. One of the biggest items, as I'd mentioned previously, is they'll each need to do an evaluation of what that 5% cut might mean for them. And at that point, then we'd have some more, we'd be able to tell the full impact of it and determine how we would testify on that bill. So, are there any questions?
Nick?
Thanks, Tammy. First, do we know what our bill number is going to be by chance yet?
Our bill number will be House Bill 1003.
Okay, so we get to hear that a lot.
Yep.
I just add,
It's my
add
favorite number this next session.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add a brief comment, I want to thank all the folks that have really worked diligently to get to this point in the process. This started back last May, effectively, and I want to thank Tammy and Dave and the vice presidents of finance at each of the institutions. I also want to thank Jace and Joe Morissette for being great partners in this kind of process, and I want to also thank the governor for his visionary support of higher education. I think we've got a good starting point, and it's a long process, but it will be fast, and things will start to move starting in early January. So thank you all for your work.
Well stated, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, thank you, Tammy. We will proceed to item 21, South Dakota Region's recent decision to provide in-state tuition to the 6 states bordering South Dakota.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be turning this over for a couple of presidents to make some statements or arguments, but what I was going to pass out, if you just pass this down this way and this way, and I'll just give you a summary. You just approved a tuition plan back in June, and you did anticipate that things would be fairly fluid because you also tasked through the Envision process and the Chancellor's Cabinet to review even greater tuition flexibility and as well as residency questions. And Dr. Bashani and President Kennedy and Dr. Richmond and I believe Van Horn are on there along with our trainer. So we were already working down that road, but then some things happened fairly quickly in the news, and you saw that news report Dr. Bashani laid on the desk there. South Dakota Regions voted last night to offer in-state tuition to North Dakota as well as several contiguous states. And you'll see in the words they have here is our goal is to grow enrollment, meet their workforce needs, and bring additional resources. The region's president said our data show 30% of non-residents stay in South Dakota after graduation. You sound familiar, the arguments? And of course, this provides a great opportunity for our campuses to recruit, basically. So this is not unprecedented for us to offer in-state tuition to other states. If you'll see on the thing I handed out, Lake Region and Minot, you both granted kind of exceptions from the standard approach we have. And so I know it's just a discussion item, but I think that it may be worth, after the discussion, for the board to even consider taking action to allow the bottom two, or maybe it's also Wapaton, maybe there'll be other presidents who want to weigh in here, to take a Minot or Lake Region approach. I would think at least to South Dakota today. They might differ and might want to do more. Maybe even go after the other states too. But that's the issue we'd like to discuss. And if I may turn it over to Dr. Brashani, Chair, with your permission.
Please do.
Thank you, Chancellor Hagerott and board members, and I would offer what I'm about to say with absolutely full respect that this is your decision. I don't get a vote. I'm only offering you a couple of recommendations and observations. The proposal you have in front of you came at the direction of the Chancellor for a group of presidents and one of the board members to study the situation. That changed fairly substantially 24 hours ago. And I'll get to that as my third and probably most important point. The first observation would be that we often talk about empowering the presidents to run their institutions, and this is very much just one more tool in our toolbox in terms of enrollment management that you have given us the liberty to manage in other ways. This would just be one more tool in the toolbox, so to speak. What we're proposing is hardly without precedent. As the Chancellor just pointed out, 2 of our institutions already do this. And so this probably doesn't rise to the level of being a bold board decision. 2 of the 11 campuses have been doing it for quite some time. The third point, though, is the one that I think is the most important. We have the opportunity to respond to an immediate enrollment threat to the state of North Dakota at a time, perhaps without precedent, that we most need out-of-state students to come to our state, graduate from our institutions, and go into our workforce. And South Dakota's statistics on their yield of those graduates, I think, is modest compared to the yield in North Dakota as far as students that stay and enter the workforce. Specifically, at least for NDSU, I can say it's double what the South Dakota yield rate is. So we have an immediate threat to the future enrollment of our institutions. And when I say immediate, I don't mean somewhere down the road. We're in the heat of the enrollment cycle right now. South Dakota was not accidental in implementing this for this summer. In other words, for 5 of the 6 states they have identified, on their way to our state, 5 of those 6 states drive through South Dakota. They pull the car over 3 or 4 hours earlier, and they get to go to a nationally ranked institution for less than the cost of coming to North Dakota. We will lose students from 5 of those 6 states, and I don't think it's going to help us on our recruitment Montanans. I can only speak again to NDSU. I don't presume for the other campuses, but we draw a considerable number of students from all of the states identified by South Dakota, and we will see an enrollment drop as a result of this. And I wouldn't blame those students for taking advantage of the economic advantage that South Dakota has offered them. This doesn't seem the time that we can afford that. This doesn't seem like a particularly bold move. If you were to be conservative in your approach to this, I would ask that you at least give us the presidents the opportunity to make this decision on a campus-by-campus basis for the 6 institutions identified by the state of North Dakota. But again, 2 of your campuses have a long-standing practice of not even limiting it in that manner, and I would ask you to consider that as you further discuss those. Thank you.
Any questions of Dean? Other presidents' input?
Chair
John?
Martin, members of the committee, and the Chancellor, thank you. I would agree with President Brashani's summary at this point. The piece I would add to it, the immediacy is critical. We already know that the South Dakota has the Build Dakota tuition model that offers free tuition for anyone, anywhere, any state, any country coming to South Dakota to get their education, to stay in the state, to work. That program has already negatively impacted our enrollment coming from South Dakota. This will be another tool in their toolbox that will, again, reduce our opportunities, and we believe will reduce our enrollment coming from the state of South Dakota. 39% this year, our past graduates, 39% of our out-of-state students take their first job in North Dakota. This will directly impact workforce negatively. We'd ask for your quick response and our ability to try to counter what South Dakota has stepped out in front of us once again. Thank you.
Chair Morton, this is Casey. I think what this shows us is a broader issue of something that we need to look at in many areas beyond this, and that is our job is to go and hire really good presidents, and then we need to let them be president and make the decisions that need to be made on a timely basis. And obviously, we're going to evaluate them every year, and if they make decisions and we think they've made bad decisions, we need to work with them if that's appropriate or do what's appropriate. And if they make good decisions, we need to congratulate them and support them. And I think right now, this is a roadblock that we need to have the ability to allow the local presidents make the best decision on a timely basis. And I think this is just one piece of what is out there. And I think, I'm not going to say because I don't know all the other issues that are restrictive for the presidents, but I think we need to give them the ability to do it. And obviously they'll be involved and work with the chancellor in informing him of what's been done and how it's impacted things. But it's a competitive market. I suspect that our higher education is the third largest business in the state of North Dakota. And I suspect that if we don't do things right, we'll have big problems with employment down the road. So I would totally support, and I'll make a motion that we allow the presidents, even those that aren't listed, to work with the chancellor to make appropriate decisions for their campus tuition.
You're making a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'm going to ask for kind of a point of order. Put this on the agenda as a discussion topic. Does that affect the ability to make a motion on it?
We did put it on the agenda. Oh.
This is a similar situation as with the tenure issue. It was placed on the agenda as a discussion item, but so in order to make it an action item, the agenda would need to be amended to that effect.
Chair Morton, I would recommend that we put the 21st item that relates to university and college tuition on the agenda to be reviewed and also considered as an action item.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Further discussion?
Chair Morton, I don't favor taking action on this today. And the reason why is because we don't have a proposal for us. We have this document, which has handwriting on it. And it doesn't provide any oversight for the board, doesn't provide any reporting back to the board with regard to what actions may have been taken by university presidents. And when we had talked about this on our group that was assigned by the chancellor, I had asked Eric Olson to identify the policies that are currently in place so that we could examine what would need to be changed to catch up to South Dakota or what we may need to do. We haven't even gotten that information. So I understand that we're in recruiting season. I understand there may be some urgency to it, but I just think that I'm a little bit concerned with approving a proposal that is not fully fleshed out, has no parameters to it, gives carte blanche discretion to university presidents with no report back guidance, and affects the taxpayers of North Dakota.
Chancellor? Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. I would agree with the previous speaker, and I do have a question for President Richmond. Are you aware of any draft legislation to address the career and technical scholarship topics that are being discussed around the state by others? Have you seen any drafts, or are you aware of any scholarship programs that may be proposed in the upcoming session for workforce training for two-year schools and those topics, similar to South Dakota, in fact?
Chair Morton and Member Hackert, yes. The North Dakota Taxation Committee did pass out of committee, and I believe has already presented the bill that would, it's very similar to the South Dakota Build Dakota model. I'll say it that way. And it's out there for public information. We are aware of that and are very supportive of it and would like to see it work its way through and be approved at the end of the session.
Thanks.
If
Can I
could,
ask you one question, follow up on that, John? So if that's approved, are you into the 2020 recruiting class or 2021? And when would you be able to even implement it?
that would be part of the bill that would be approved, or that when it would begin, and all the implementation and how and the processes would have to be worked out and flushed out during the legislative session as the bill works its way through the session. Chair Morton, if I could just add one more piece. What we do know about the upcoming generation, the Generation Z, they are much more cautious about affordability. And they are going to make more decisions based upon affordability than maybe what some of their former generations have done. Our research tells us they are not going to take on the debt that they saw their brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers take on, and they're going to make more of their decisions based upon the cost. And we're looking for every tool we can to balance that. The taxation bill could do that, granting us the ability to get.
Thank you. Nick, did you have?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you know, I appreciate those comments, Dr. Richmond, and it's a really well pointed out fact that these students aren't going to take out the loans, but yet we as a board are continually granting tuition increases, and then we turn around and there's a news headline about a product being sold on a different state. You know, in general, when I see discounts, the first response for a lot of folks is, well, we have to discount our product then too, but this is really unique because our product is funded by taxpayers. And there's been a lot of thought and discussion that has went in over several years to continue to develop the tuition model. The legislature has been very supportive of pushing forward with revisions of the tuition model. I think it's definitely something to look at, but to simply just quickly turn on a dime when we don't know the full implications. And this is a matter we could probably discuss over the course of maybe just a month or two to make an educated decision on what those implications might be. So I would hope that we reject the motion. We continue the conversation over the next 1 to 2 meetings.
Dean? Again, simply as to help you make an informed decision, keep in mind 2 months from now the admission cycle is over. The decisions have already been made. South Dakota is already seizing on a pretty substantial marketing campaign for this. I appreciate the gesture, but I would want you to make that informed decision that it will be too late, at least for this admission cycle. Now, one suggestion I might offer, if reporting is a concern, simply have us model the 2 institutions that have been doing this for a decade, and we'll report in the same way as them.
Chancellor?
If I could just address Member Trainer questions. Those are great questions, and I just want to assure you that it's a very deliberate cycle. We do reciprocity with the states. We interact with WICHE, MEC on their various reciprocity programs. Then every spring we issue the plan. This is the other cover part of it. So it's a very methodical process. And again, since they're just adopting the Lake Region Minot model, they're adopting something that all would have the same requirements. So I just put you at ease a little bit that it is faster than we normally do, but it is unusual for South Dakota to issue such a statement in December because they have a normal cycle like we do. They should normally come out in the spring. So they clearly are doing some urgent moves. They have a new chancellor there. Their former chancellor left somewhat abruptly. So my guess is they are doubling down on recruiting. So what's probably happening here.
There was someone down here who had their hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering whether I could offer a compromise. Is there any way we can have a quick half-hour in-between meeting ASAP to give people a week to put the information together and have it decided then?
Take a break.
No, I meant a very, not take a break now, but have an additional meeting in between this one and the end of January one, which is 2 months from now. If we would have another meeting, let's say in a week or 10 days, and people could get the requested information together in the meantime, then one could decide it then and may still be on time. Because I do agree with Dean, if we wait 2 months, this admission cycle is going to be hurting. And we have lost students already and money through that. We may or may not lose 5% of the funding formula. If we lose any more students, it'll hurt us twice, through the funding formula and through the tuition. And that gets us back to how many faculty are we going to have left and staff by the time we are done with all that.
Thank you. Andy?
Just Chairman, just a couple of quick comments. That I applaud Dr. Bashani in bringing this forward. I mean, they're paying attention to what's going on, and they know what they need to do to make a change. So good for them for doing so. Second thing is this might appear to be like a chess game. South Dakota's made a move. We got a counter, and maybe we don't need to do that today. I don't know, but maybe we do need to do something rather quickly to address something that might be problematic for us in the very near future. That's it. Thanks.
Casey?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what I said. I think we've hired excellent presidents. I think we need to give them the guidance from a distance, but they're down in the trenches. And this is a business decision. If I was running a business in South Dakota or a competitor did something to me, I'm not going to wait a month or two to tell them how I'm going to respond to them. I'm going to probably have an answer within a couple of days. And I think we have to trust the presidents that they're going to make the right decisions for their respective institutions. And in turn, they will have to work with the chancellor and also the State Board of Higher Ed. And in turn, we'll have to deal with the internal issues that relate to the amount of monies that they may not have because of the changes that they need to make. I think this is just the first shot over the bow of many that we're going to see as time goes on, and you're not going to have the ability to say, well, let's think about this one for a while. Because when you think about it, the competition will be running ahead of you, and you won't catch up to them.
I have a couple thoughts. The taxpayers support higher education. The students are a better customer than the taxpayers. They pay a lot more of the budget than the taxpayers do. I don't know, it was the interim committee at Mayville this past year where I had a little bit of a heated exchange with one of our legislators, and I was arguing for more autonomy for our campus leaders, and he told me very directly, they have autonomy. They can set out-of-state tuition. That's their right. They already have that authority to set out-of-state tuition. So we might be talking about something that they already have it to set out-of-state. Chancellor?
the legislator was right in that they could go higher if there wasn't reciprocity, but what Dean Brashani is getting to is under our policy, we have no lower than 1.2, and that's why they're asking us permission to do that. So that's the nuance.
Please do.
Donna? Okay. Board Policy 805.1 does require that the board set the rates for the set tuition rates. But I wasn't sure, and I didn't understand the motion to be changing that policy at this time. But what I'm wondering is maybe a compromise between the two different sides of this is, would the institutions be able to come back? We do have a table, and I think the chancellor was looking at it, that when we presented the tuition models in April, there's a table that we lay out all the rate factors. Would the institutions be able to, in very short order, it could be a week, I don't know what it would be, would you be able to calculate those rate factors and bring them back to the board, and maybe there could be a special meeting where you'd actually see the numbers that we're talking about here? Because the institutions they're the ones that calculated those rate factors in the first place, and so I'm wondering if they could turn it around that quickly so we could bring a written proposal that you could see those rate factors and take action. I don't know how long that would take institutions to do.
Point of order, Chancellor, Chair Morton. I think the motion on the floor is a motion to add the item as an agenda item, and I think before we have a motion already. We already have the ability to discuss it, which is fine, but we should dispose of this motion one way or another, and then we can either deal with it at that time or discuss how we want to deal with it.
Did that motion get a second? Okay. Further discussion?
Yes. I'm going to again go back to business model. Now, granted, I'm a physician, but medicine is a business. You break your organization on the last 15 to 20% of your business. So if you lose, and I don't know what the numbers are, I don't think they're massive numbers, but it's a significant number, you're really hitting into what makes those organizations, the colleges and universities, be successful. Because they have their fixed costs, and a certain number of students, you get above a certain number, you're adding in to benefit, and it's not costing you any more to do that line of business. And what we're going to lose if we lose something here is that last bit of what's a big chunk of profit or success for the colleges and universities.
Any other discussion? Want to repeat the motion, please?
From what I understand, this motion is just to make it an action item on the agenda rather than just a discussion. Is that correct?
Correct.
I think it has to be approved as an action item, then we'd have to make another motion to allow that to happen. That's what I think I've heard. Eric, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I mean, theoretically, we should have voted in to discuss it so that we were actually talking about the motion we wanted to pass or didn't want to pass.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Thornton?
No.
Mr. Hacker?
No.
Ms. Nesset? Offline now. Ms. Louders?
No.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Trainer?
No.
Board Chair Morton?
Yes. Okay, it's for discussion only.
Chair Morton, I think it's fine for purposes of discussion that we, I think at least as a board member, I need more information about what the current policy is, what the past practice has been with regard to college presidents reporting this information back to the board. And then I have no problem taking action before the January meeting, if needed, to handle recruitment. But I don't think that we need to take a handwritten document like this and make it board policy. I think we need to have a little bit more of a thorough understanding of what action has been taken, what policies are currently in place, and then take action.
Nick?
I agree with the previous speaker. The other thing I would ask is that I do know that there's a Budget and Finance Committee meeting that is being scheduled. That committee has traditionally handled the tuition model, and adopting a change in the tuition model would need to be accompanied by a refiling and reapproval of the tuition rates that were already approved, which is the policy that Tammy was talking about. So I'm hopeful that I'll just ask Tammy to add that topic to that committee meeting where there's a thorough discussion of the tuition model, proposed changes, which I'm hopeful the committee would look positively upon with the further information, but also at the same time, the institutions that do want to move down to the 1.0 also have their tuition rates ready to be reapproved by the board, which is required of those institutions for this upcoming year, which is the same students and freshmen class that they're trying to recruit. So we need to adopt those for the 2019 year for those institutions that do want to offer the lower rate to those specific states.
Chair Morton, when is that budget meeting, please? When is that scheduled, Tammy?
Tentatively the 19th.
Tentatively, the late afternoon on the 19th, but I just need to confirm one other board member.
Okay, thank you.
That's the one I needed to check with. Yeah. We will figure it out and get back to everyone.
Chair Morton, I think what this brings out is a bigger problem that we have, and it somewhat addresses things that I've asked, and I know Tammy's working on getting them to me, and that is, the one thing I've figured out in a year and a half on the board is that we're being asked to run in a race, and we'll pick a mile, and people set down, well, here's what kind of time you need to have. But then between all the different bodies that interact, which would be governor, legislature, State Board of Higher Ed, presidents, instead of just running a mile, we put hurdles out. But we tell you to keep running in the fast time. And I think this is just one of the first things we're going to see about how are we going to react quickly to changes in our environment, and what changes for one university or college may be totally different for another university and college. And my point is, I don't think we're set up to be addressing those issues. And part of it is the legislation. Part of it is things that we're forced to do. And I don't think anything is set up to react in a time, I'm going to use the term timely basis to what's going to be rapid change within the environment in which we're living. And again, this one is about the students. The next one could be something totally different. And we need to start addressing the roadblocks or hurdles that are out there and get rid of them when we can. Some of them we can't. The legislative ones, our hands are tied. But if a university or college is a business, why should the legislature be telling the business how you should charge students? The president should be able to set their budgets or look at their budgets through and work with us, but they need to be the ones that work on, well, what's the best tuition for their university or college? They know what it is. We're here in a very distant fashion. We should be flying real high, making broad policy, and many of the things are what our expectations are of the presidents. Our greatest job, our most important job, is to hire really good presidents and make sure they do their job. And right now, not all us, some of the legislature, we're interfering in the process. And I don't have any problem that the motion was defeated, but I think we better figure out, just like Andy has said, this is a chess game. How are you going to react to how the pieces on the board were moved? And I suspect that we better have something done in a relatively short period of time. Relatively short means whatever the presidents tell us is the window of opportunity for getting students or for losing students.
Help me understand what more information is going to change our mind about this.
I want the current policy. I want to see what it is. I want to know what past practices have been. And I want to see a policy that is written down that I can review and understand and know that there are either reporting guidelines or some kind of standards for making these determinations. Because here's the issue. There's pressure on college presidents to increase enrollment. And if college presidents could give away our product for free to increase the enrollment, they may want to do that. But there's also, when you give away the product of an education, you create a greater burden on the taxpayers. And our greatest responsibility is not necessarily to pick good presidents. Our greatest responsibility is to run a good system and to run an effective and cost-effective system for the taxpayers. That's what I view it as. So I need more information before I make an informed decision on this issue. And I can't make it on the basis of a handwritten document that says we just need to react because South Dakota did something. I would rather be proactive than reactive.
That train left the station, the proactive train.
Chair Morton, and I appreciate what Dan has said, but at the same time, there are so many hurdles out there that we don't control that don't allow us to be the most efficient system. It's a really good system, but it's not the most efficient system because we don't have decisions being made at the right place. I mean, when you have a legislature making a major decision for a college or university, is that where it should be made? No. It should be made by the people that are closest to that institution, and that's the presidents that we need to hire. And if they don't do a good job, our job is to either work with them to make them better or to replace them.
The other elephant in the room is the data around declining high school enrollments and high school graduations. And there's a lot of data out there that points to the fact that we're going to see declining high school enrollments from now until 2029, 2030. In the 2029, 2030 timeframe, we'll start to see an uptick in high school enrollment according to the data. That's a long way. We're going to see some real disruption just because there's not enough high school graduates. And that's why the predictions are that, I don't know, so many colleges and universities are going to go under. And I think we have some presidents that want to make sure that their institution isn't one of them.
Chair Morton, I guess this is a question for other members on the board. Knowing what we've discussed, what time frame are we looking at for making a decision, either leaving it the way it is or making some change?
I wonder, can we make a decision within 10 days, a week to 10 days? Can we move that fast?
That's what Vice Chair and I were just talking about. Tammy, could you look to see if there's a way to move up the Budget Finance Committee? And Member Trainer, if you could look at your schedule, to try to make it fit. We could try to get that done in the next couple of days and then have a special board meeting before Christmas. And then, just accelerate
Mr. Chairman,
things.
the schedule can be modified. I mean, I have some personal conflicts, but that's fine. But I think it might be if the institutions can decide which the changes they're going to request to the exceptions they'll want to ask to the tuition model, and then what rate factors they want to charge and which categories. I would assume they can make those decisions. I would have to look to the institutions to see if they can figure that out, how fast they can figure that out.
With that said, is it possible that we would just have a full board special meeting instead of budget and finance first and then a full board within the next 10 days? Is that possible? Or Chair Nick from Budget Finance, do you prefer it Budget and Finance first, and
It doesn't really matter to me when the meeting is scheduled. I think it's a proper forum to handle tuition. It has historically, for many years, been handled in Budget and Finance, and brought forward to the board, and it makes a lot of this weird conversation happening go a lot smoother with a solution. There's two topics that we've discussed that we are confusing. One is this document which says we want to be able to market in-state tuition, I think is what is being asked. That doesn't mean we can offer in-state tuition because the tuition rates have already been adopted for 19. My recommendation is we meet as a committee and try to adopt those tuition rates that fit for those institutions, and we have to modify this policy at the same time. So, short answer, sorry, yeah, we'll schedule it in a moment when this meeting is over and try to come up with a thoughtful solution and hopefully meet.
We'll have we can have a digital board meeting sometime before Christmas when you're ready.
Sounds like a plan.
Chair Morton, just one more quick comment related to the chess analogy thing, but this is something I suppose that we need to make a move, but maybe we don't need to make a knee-jerk move. We need to be a little more thoughtful about it. Maybe Dan needs some more information. I get that too. The campuses need to provide us back some tuition numbers and stuff, so I think we can do that. That seems to make sense to me too.
Eric, you have a thought? I always tell myself, don't overreact, don't overreact, don't overreact, but sometimes you got to overreact. And I'm this whole thing, the quicker we can move, the better it is for the campuses and for our system. So if we can move, we can get this resolved before Christmas, that'd be great.
One question I do have for President Brashani or one of the presidents is for in-state, apparently South Dakota is going to charge in-state tuition to a North Dakota resident. What is our in-state rate currently versus a comparable college or university at South Dakota? Is our in-state rate equivalent currently, or are we cheaper? Or?
Our in-state rate is above that of South Dakota.
Okay. By how much? Are we talking hundreds or 1,000?
I don't have those numbers right in front of me.
Okay.
Our in-state rate is the same or higher, you said?
North Dakota's in-state rate is higher than South Dakota's in-state rate.
Well, I don't think we have any motions on the floor, do we?
Motion to adjourn.
Not yet.
Oh, sorry.
Not yet.
Public comments, sorry.
Is Margaret on the phone?
Yes, I'm on the phone.
Oh, Margaret. Margaret, we want to thank you for your years of service, for stepping in as interim president of Valley City State twice. And you've always been a true professional. You lead with grace and humility, and it's very much appreciated. We have a beautiful plaque for you. We wish you were here, but we will make sure it gets to you. But it reads like this. On behalf of the North Dakota State Board of Higher Education, we present this plaque to Margaret Dahlberg, PhD, interim president, July 2014 to December 2014, and December 2017 to December 2018. In appreciation for 4 years of dedicated service to the state and the North Dakota University system. So thank you very much. And I think I understand that you are done at midnight on December 16th as interim president. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Not that you're counting the days.
No, not at all.
Again,
but really, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Very much
I
appreciated.
appreciate the very confidence.
So we now will have public comment.
This is Eric Olson, counsel for the board. For the purposes of the open meetings requirements, before the board began today, I presented this sheet, which is just a parliamentary procedure sheet discussing motions and procedure under Robert's rules. Each board member has a copy of that, and I have extra copies over with Mr. Erickson at the other side of the room. And we'd be happy to get a copy for anyone who would like a copy of those, or else you can reach out to the system office or myself, and we'd be happy to provide those electronically as well.
I should have mentioned, too, if Margaret's still on, she is going to go back to her VP role as provost, which is excellent for us. Public comment.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I don't see any public comments, so I'm looking at you, Deborah. Are you not going to comment? Future agenda items. Thoughts on future agenda items? Hopefully we're going to have a digital board meeting pretty soon, and the item's going to be tuition. And our next board meeting is scheduled for January 24th, 2019 via technology, but we hopefully will have a meeting in December yet to get this other tuition issue resolved. Any other comments from presidents or board members before we adjourn? Any assessment of the meeting? Future agenda items on your mind? Dan, just for the record, I really do appreciate having an attorney on the board.
Yep.
But so thank you for...
Everybody likes an attorney when they need one.
This meeting is adjourned. Oh, we need a motion. Is there a
attorney.
motion to adjourn? Is there a motion?
Thank you.
It's been moved. Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Adjourned.